And we're back.
Welcome to episode 233 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
Now, Perram, last episode you kind of surprised me with more harsh words about second edition as a system than I have ever heard from you. I even, going into the episode, you had posted in our private chat just being like, hey, I might go on a rant. I expected it to be about the secrets of Magic playtest specifically,
right?
Because that's what the topic was about. But no, it really was that to express your dislike of some of the aspects of Secrets of Magic playtest, you really had to go into some issues you had with second edition as a whole. So today, the plan is to address some of those issues just to make sure that everything is clear. Because you and I talk fairly often,
right?
But we do not talk about Pathfinder unless there is a live mic in front of us, because it's content,
right?
Which in this case is kind of to the detriment of the show, because we were not actually on the same page about our feelings. So today we're going to make sure those feelings are clear, and we are going to offer up some solutions about some issues we have with second edition's rules. Mine are more specific to character creation. Yours seem like they're a little more all over the place, not in a bad way, just like they cover more ground.
Right.
So before we get into our solutions, we need to talk about what the specific issues are. So I'd like you to kind of revise and maybe detail what you were talking about last episode.
All right. So one of the first things I do want to establish is actually I am very pro PF2. It made a lot of changes to Pathfinder that I very much appreciated and wanted to happen. But there were definitely some aspects of some of the patterns I saw with the game more during the playtest, and then kind of it disappeared for a while, and it showed back up again in the Summoner Magus playtest document again. And that is where I think that the game overreacted and focuses way too much on keeping that balance super, super tight, to the detriment of having fun at the table and to the detriment of players actually feeling heroic. The game, I think, is tuned way too difficult. The math is tuned way too tight, and it goes way out of its way to keep itself from being broken to the point to where you end up with these ridiculous restrictions on some abilities that just seem to have no place in any sort of fantasy of a game other than one worshiping at the altar of game balance.
Yeah, so I know that in first edition it had a reputation for having trap options.
Right.
The idea being that there are just some choices that are worse than others. But the thing is that if you make a character, you choose a trap option, you play a campaign, you realize my character could have been stronger. You learn, and then you make a stronger character by not taking those less optimal ones.
And this was intentional. If you read some of Monty Cook's original design documents, when they were designing 3.0, which is what Pathfinder eventually spawned from, the trap options were intentional to the game, and I think that was a bad idea there too. But they wanted system mastery to be part of third edition, that people could be better at the game, better at making characters than other people. Toughness is the most famous of the trap options. At level 1, toughness seems like an okay idea. You get 3 extra hit points in third edition Dungeons and Dragons by taking the toughness feat, and the real truth is that precious feat slot that you just spent for 3 hit points is all but worthless by about level 5.
Fair enough. Now, I disagree with the tone of the term trap option, because I do still find a lot of those had value, and I do think having better options has value. But I see what they were doing with second edition. I get that the math is tighter. That was a good thing for the most part.
Yeah.
My issue then is that agency has been removed from character creation with the siloing of options. That's where I have my biggest issues, that it's like, I want to come up with a cool character concept, but I must do it the way the game allows. Whereas in first edition, if I just read a cool feat, I'm like, cool, now I can do anything with this feat. I just know that I want to make a character with this feat.
Right.
Second edition, if I find a cool feat, it's like, well, I have to play that class. And because it's such a high difficulty, I also have to choose an ancestry and a background that will give me an 18 in the stat that will allow me to do that feat with that class. And it just feels like, at the end of the day, I get a single choice and everything else is laid out too strictly for me.
Yeah. And I think that me and you're going to disagree on where that line is on how much siloing is too much siloing, though I do definitely think that the game has really gone a bit too far with walling up those options in certain circumstances. I do think that the multi-class archetype feats and the archetype feats we saw in APG really relieved some of that worry, but it still isn't a perfect solution to the problem.
No, if anything, it's frustrating because it means you've got the silo, and now after the silo's been built sturdy, they had to build escape hatches into the silo so that there was more than one way to access it.
Bridges.
Whereas had they just not made such a rigid silo to begin with, they wouldn't need to then release a really intriguing secret way of accessing it. Like if it was just if there was just less restrictions, you wouldn't need to introduce options that reduce restrictions.
Yeah, and this isn't actually even a new topic for us. When we were talking during the playtest, this was the one part that me and you both like rallied behind of like, this is frustrating, and then pointing at and then like we said during last episode and during our episodes during the playtest, we would point to the magic system where they made the 4 schools of magic or the 4 traditions of magic, and we were like, why didn't they just do that? Because that was awesome, and they went in the exact opposite direction with feats.
Not only did they not do that, they specifically went like, had they just ported over first edition for more combat heavy classes or just character design, you would have had a fair amount of options. Then the spells, the way it was done was future proof in that you don't have to do a specific new class list, because that was really getting frustrated if you had the player's companion line, which was largely ignored in the hardcover line. And so if a new spellcaster's coming out, like the Arcanist, the list does not specifically, or was the Arcanist just the wizard spell list? Maybe that was a bad example.
Yeah.
Okay, well, a new cast comes out with a new spell list.
Oh, yeah.
Those spells will not include the ones that are in the softcover line, and therefore they almost feel like they are out of continuity.
And as somebody who has had to, over the course of the entirety of PF1's existence, squeezed more and more classes into a tiny little card as they kept adding spell lists and they kept getting access to old spells, I very much appreciated that change for more than just pragmatic reasons.
So I have come up with a couple of systems that I believe are future-proof. It is to take Pathfinder 2nd Edition and future-proof it. And I think before we get into any of our specific ideas for how we're going to do this, and earlier you alluded to how our ideas are going to differ, we don't actually know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We did these independently. So we may have a lot of crossover. We may have completely different things. You may introduce something you think I'm going to like and I hate, or vice versa.
Yep. And there is one other thing we agreed on, is that this series of house rules, we are going to publish them. We are going to put them out for free on the No Direction website, at least on the No Direction website, for people to download. We're going to actually, work this over, do it up with spit and polish and aplomb. And also, if you're one of our patrons, we are going to let you get advanced preview of what we're working on and let you hopefully, get your ideas in there and critique us as we try to develop this. So we are going to put our words where our mouth are, or our PDF where our mouth is. Anyway, whatever we do, we're gonna make what we're affectionately calling 2-point KD at the moment into an actual document that you will all be able to download for free and look at and consider whether or not any of these house rules or hacks are ones you want to use in your game.
And one last thing I want to state is that when we reviewed the Pathfinder 2nd Edition core rulebook, we gave it a fairly positive review.
Yeah.
There are 2 things to remember here. One, it is much better than the playtest.
Yes.
And so I think we might have been a little forgiving about some of the things we still had issues with. But 2, we do still enjoy Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Absolutely. This is still my favorite fantasy game to play. I've tried out, I prefer it to playing PF1 now that I've had to go back and forth and play a lot of PF1 and PF2. I prefer it to PF1, especially I prefer it as a GM. It is so much easier to run as a game master. And I prefer it to 5th edition, where I have got to play in some 5th edition games since then. And there are alternate games out there. Fantasy Age is really cool to scratch a different itch, but of all of the robust fantasy-like dungeon nearing games, Pathfinder 2 is still my favorite. And the issues that I have with the game are very tiny compared to the things I very much love about the game.
Which actually reminds me, I would say at this point, I think I firmly believe Pathfinder 1 is my preferred Pathfinder and my preferred role-playing game system for a lot of reasons that are specific to me. And my goals and my hacks were not to make this my perfect game. It was to address specific things that I do think are system-wide problems, because I preferred first edition's way of just handling, like, here's some numeric-based bonuses, because then I don't have to remember them. I write them on my character sheet. They are applied. My character is forever changed by that. Whereas in second edition, the higher level I go, the more likely I'm like, oh, right, I forgot that. You've played with me in Adventurous. You know that at one point I forgot Xavier was a spellcaster. One of the more recent episodes, I forgot that I had Arcane Strike, which means every single time I should have been doing one more point of damage.
Right.
Having things that have to be toggled on, I am very likely to forget them. In fact, we just did the Secrets of Magic playtest episode of KD Plays, and I played a Magus. And at the end of it, V was asking me, hey, did you take this option that would have given you 1d6 additional damage every time you attacked with an energy-based spell? It's like, I did take that. Every single time I attacked, I should have been doing 1d6 more damage. It is just not conducive with the way I think or the way I play as much as first edition is. Right. So, like, because it's a game, because it's lighthearted, and because I'm not particularly competitive when it comes to my role-playing games, I am okay with those mistakes, and I will, apply my humor to them when they happen. But first edition is a much smoother experience for me. But that is not what I am trying to. I am not trying to make I'm not trying to make second edition first edition. Right. I'm trying to make second edition better.
Yeah, and also this is also an area where me and you absolutely differ, because a lot of the things that you like about first edition are exactly the things I wanted to change about first edition, and no bigger example than the second edition fighter, which I love to death. I love the second edition fighter. I love to play second edition fighters because it's all these cool special abilities I get to toggle on and off and do all this really cool stuff in the game that I used to only get to do with casters, and that is not what you wanted out of a fighter.
First, fighter was my favorite class in every edition of Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder that I've played, except for second edition, which is a class I will never play.
I wonder, is there a build of second edition fighter that would play closer to your ideal fighter?
Probably a very archetype-heavy fighter. That is one of the advantages of the fighter, is that it lets you take archetypes, which allows you to more broadly take like combat style type feats,
right?
Which I don't think I should take an archetype to get those. I think everyone should, which we're going to address when we get to some of my specific hacks. But now the goals of what we're going to be doing. These are mine. This is my wording. You correct me if anything doesn't reflect.
Okay.
You. First goal is forwards and backwards compatibility with Pathfinder second edition.
Yes.
I am not planning to negate the books. I am not saying if you have the 2-point KD, you don't need Pathfinder second edition. I am saying the opposite. In order to use Pathfinder 2-point KD, you need Pathfinder second edition core rulebook and all of the works. And I don't want to just say, like, here's all the feats that I think should do this instead of that. I want to say, here's a filter that when you apply to the feats, even if those feats haven't been published yet, ideally this filter will still work no matter what books are still to come for second edition.
Right.
All right. Retain ancestry and class niches. The argument for the siloing is that it gives the ancestries and classes niches or niches, depending on, I think that is anyway, one of those words that's different, a dialectal difference. I still want ancestries and classes to have niches, but one of the problems I have is that so much weight is given to choosing your class that when the APG came out, you basically had about 10 or 12 pages that are relevant to a character that already exists. Because there's no just, here's the combat feats, and then everyone gets to enjoy the feat chapter. No, you get to enjoy your class's chapter. APG is 300 pages, but if you only have one character and you want to add options to them, you only got about 12 pages. I want to use the whole APG.
Right. And also, some of that was intentional. There is one part of the thing that we dislike about the class design that was very much intentionally done in a way that I can't fault them. And that is that they publicly stated this, that part of this design was so that it would be very new player friendly, to where all the decisions you needed to make about your character was in your character's class section. And I can understand that concept and why that would be friendly for new players. I just think that this is an area where I do not want to make the sacrifice of the flexibility of the game that it could have in order to make it better for new players.
Yeah, I'm sitting here hoping that the beginner box has a more flexible character creation system, which is the opposite. It should be that what the system we got in the core rulebook is the version of the system we got in the beginner's box, so that if you're a new player, you're a little more handheld, but if you are an experienced player, there are much more there's much more leniency without having to specifically take options to get around restrictions.
Right. And also, like, ironically, a lot of the solutions to some of the things we're going to express, some of those actually exist if you're willing to jump through a lot of hoops and bend over a little bit backwards, which is ironically that it promotes system mastery again, to the point to where to really flex PF2, you have to know PF2 like an expert. Like when I explained to you how actually there's no problem with siloing with Ancestry feats, because if you jump through this complicated hoops with being adopted, which doesn't actually mean adopted even according to the rules as written, then you can do whatever you want with your Ancestry, which is true, but also convoluted.
And it also gives up to 3 problems. One is that you do have to spend the option to, well, no, I guess it's you're spending an Ancestry feat to get a class feat. But I do specifically dislike that feat. And in fact, when I was saying I want to do forward and backwards compatibility, I was saying, but if we have to sacrifice adopted Ancestry, I'm okay with that, which it ends up I didn't have to. But I dislike the hoops. So that is one of the issues with it. I dislike the implied flavor, although, like you said, they did go out of their way to say, even though it's adopted, you're not actually adopted.
It just means that you're
a different kind of problem with the flavor.
Which is not, because it's a different definition of adopted. It's you've adopted the ancestry instead of you were.
The ancestry adopted you. Yeah. It's actually, I should appreciate it for the play on.
Yes. I'm actually I've actually very much appreciate how there is definitely evidence that there is somebody in the PF2 team that is secretly putting in back doors to give us what we want. A lot of and that
I want
is,
front doors.
You want front doors, but I am super glad that when I make a PFS character, there is lots of wiggle room for me to jump through those hoops to get the exact character I want.
And finally, my last goal is to encourage slightly more powerful characters, which is funny because normally my goal would be to make exactly as powerful characters, even though you're opening up options, which means that broadly they should be a little more powerful. And the hardest thing, the biggest challenge should have been making it so that they aren't more powerful. But like you said, Pathfinder 2nd Edition is hard.
Yeah.
And because the math is tight, you can't actually learn from your mistakes and make a better character next time. So we're just going to making characters allow for more powerful characters.
And this isn't just an opinion that I've had or you've had, or and I don't want to out specific people in order to not get anybody in trouble here, but I've spoken to multiple designers, freelancers, and team members who have all later after the fact acknowledged, yeah, this was tuned a little too hard.
Which brings us to our first hack, which is neither of ours. It's actually Vanessa's. The simplest way to hack Pathfinder to address that last one of encouraging more powerful characters. If you don't want to do all the other things we do, Vanessa's advice is just treat every monster as though it's one level higher. And that just about evens it out so that it's an interesting level of difficulty rather than a frustrating level of difficulty.
This is a lever I have pulled for my Age of Ashes game, and it went from my players having a almost miserable experience to having a joyful experience. And I have not informed them that this is a lever I've poured, except for one. I cleared it with them just to make sure that they
don't call you out on mistakes.
Well, I just wanted to run it by a player to make sure that they weren't going to be offended by it, or just to give, but I didn't want to let all the players know. But I basically snuck in an extra level into their level up routine, and that has resulted in them much more enjoying the game and enjoying the challenges. I'm actually, in my house rules that I'm going to present, I actually come up with a different solution for that is a little bit more ingrained in the house rules, but it is to achieve the same result.
All right, Perram. We have done all the preamble. We have set up all the expectations. We are now going to do into the alpha test of these house rules, which we're then going to move on to beta with the patrons. And eventually we're going to release these once they are fully fleshed out and developed.
Yes.
Can you get me your first hack, your first house rule?
My first house rule. Okay, my first house rule is not addressing any of those. It is simply to address a completely different issue that has come up in the community that I agree with wholeheartedly, and that is that I wanted to have flexible ancestry ability scores just become standard. Right now, when you have an ancestry, you'll have set amount of ability scores. There are various reasons that this is problematic, both socially and for gameplay reasons, and it makes it very difficult to make the character you want. It has facilitated the need for the weird gnome rule and the optional take 2 negatives to get a positive rule that was added to the final version of the game itself.
Which one is the weird gnome rule?
It's that same rule. It's the
okay. I thought that was, and then it sounded like you were talking about two separate.
How to make a weird gnome, and the end of the day is I just think, and I've seen this proposed for all sorts of other games, but I want there to be, and of course my internet connection is very unstable right now.
Yeah, I did not hear most of what you just said.
No,
and we lose the network connection.
Oh goodness. It's my ISP. They're being absolute jerks today. Alright, I'm gonna restart the stream because I obviously have a connection.
Okay.
Looks like OBS might crash on me. That would be great. Oh, it's come back and start streaming. We're being right back. Thankfully, this is recording all into one solid recorded file.
That's good. So do you want to go back at all, or are you just going to...
I'm going to go back to introducing my feats. Okay, everybody. We had... my internet connection right now is very... unfortunately unstable. This might happen a few times during the episode. Just hang on. We'll be right back as soon as I can click the button and get it refreshed again. I'm gonna back up and say my first rule addresses none of the stuff we just did. It's that I wanted to make ability scores more flexible. This is because they can be problematic for both gameplay reasons, character conceptual reason, some social expectations that have become a topic of discussion lately about how certain ancestries have been used as parallels and problematic cultural implications about stats. And simply put, when you create a character, just choose either +2 bonus to any stat you want and nothing else, or +2 bonus to 1 mental and 1 physical, and -2 anywhere you want to your character. And congratulations, or sorry, in PF2 check parlance, that would be 2 boosts, 1 mental, 1 physical, and a flaw, or a single boost and no flaw.
Yeah, I have seen this one or something similar to it suggested elsewhere. I actually am not a fan. I understand a lot of the arguments for it, but I do feel like there should be, like, these are ancestries, these are fancy creatures, and a lot of what makes them different is that they are physiologically and culturally different, and that is how I read the ability score differences.
Yeah,
and in fact, a lot of the time, reading those ability score bonuses and negatives, it's subtextual and it has inspired characters for me in the past.
Right.
And losing those, I think, really would level out the Ancestry's identity a little too much for me.
I can see that, and I understand that. I just think that this is one of the trade-offs for me that'd be worth it. That the problems it introduces are harder to overcome than acknowledging the same inspiration sources and coming up with different ways to get those inspirations.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, it's a simple one. It's an easy one. I don't have much more to say on that one. It's one that's being passed around the community a whole ton. And yeah, I think it's a pretty nifty optional rule, no matter which version of the game you're playing.
All right. My first one will also be about Ancestries. It is called Ancestries Young and Old. I find you don't get enough mechanical definition of your ancestry at character creation. I find that right off the bat, you get a single option that really reflects you beyond just the single page of stats, which really is not a whole lot. In fact, I couldn't make Xavier feel like Xavier until 5th level when I get my second ancestry feat, just because what you get as an elf is the same as you get as an elf in 1st edition, but spread out over the entire career as an elf, which does not make a lot of sense to me, although this doesn't address getting ancestry feats later on. But I do want to front load a little bit more ancestry mechanics to the character. And so instead of just doing you get an extra ancestry feat, which was one of my ideas, but that then evolved into turning an ancestry feat into like a points buy system where you get a budget of like a 5th level ancestry feat costs a certain amount, and you've got your budget at the beginning, and you can do a little more piecemeal. That didn't feel appropriate to 2nd edition's character creation identity. And so I took that and I revised it into something that I thought was really clever. And that is having you define your character's starting age at the beginning during the ancestry selection, and the age determines the feats you get. So I've got 3 age categories here: young, adult, and venerable. If you choose to be a young character, I have you. Oh, did I? Okay. I went back and forth on the exact number, so I was a little surprised I went with the higher number. You get to select 4 what I call common ancestry feats at 5th level. I'll define the common, uncommon, and rare ancestry feats after I go over this. At 5th level, you unlock and you can access uncommon ancestry feats. At 9th level, you can access rare ancestry feats. You still must meet the prerequisites for the ancestry feats. Actually, you know what? Before I go on to adult, I will define that. 1st level ancestry feats are given the common tag. Well, actually, no tag, because common there is no common trait. It just goes straight to the rarity tag. So 5th level ancestry feats are tagged uncommon, and they lose the 5th level prerequisite. 9th level ancestry feats are tagged as rare, and they lose the 9th level prerequisite. Ancestry feats above 9th level are also tagged as rare, but they retain their character level prerequisite. So if you are a young character, you are like you're the sponge, so you're still getting a lot of what you're getting a lot of culture. You are more exposed to your culture than any other culture, and that actually means that you gain additional but more common ancestry feats. That's the thinking there about having young characters getting 4 common ancestry feats. As an adult, you've got a little bit more experience. You follow a well-trodden path to adventure. Adults get to select 3 ancestry feats at 1st level, including up to 1 uncommon ancestry feat. So you see where I was coming from with the points buy for ancestry feats. Now it's just codified it more in line with how 2nd edition handles character creation. So you would get 2 1st level and 1 5th level ancestry feats at right off the bat. At 5th level, you then get access to all uncommon ancestry feats, not just the one you got at 1st level. And as well as rare ancestry feats. But you still must meet the prerequisites. Then you've got venerable, someone who really took their time to answer the call to adventure and had a whole other life before their adventuring career even begins.
Ezrin.
This is reflected. But what's that?
Ezrin,
yes. I was definitely had Ezrin in mind when I was designing that. So you get to select 2 ancestry feats at 1st level, including up to 1 that is uncommon or rare. So you might be thinking, having a 9th level feat at 1st level sounds game breaking. I looked over all of the 9th level ancestry feats in the core rulebook that do not have prerequisites. They are fairly balanced. It's like, as a goblin, you get a climb speed. That's not something you have to wait till 9th level to get, and it's not really something that can be abused. The ones that are a little more abused are the ones that have a prerequisite, and so it already balances itself out. So basically, you get a flavor-driven choice at 1st level. Do you want to have a whole bunch of low-level ones so that you've got a lot of versatility? Do you have a specific idea in mind for this ancestry that you want to go for, and you want to get something a little bit higher? Or are you willing to sacrifice all of your flexibility in order to get one much higher level feat? And how much the young, adult, or venerable plays into it is up to you. There is no exact age range or even maturity range for these. It is one of the reasons I chose vague but clear terms for each age category. So young really could be the little kid, or it could be a teenager, or it could be somebody, if it, by your definition, someone that is a university level adventurer is still a young adventurer, and they're not an adult until you reach your 30s, that is still your definition of young. And so you can apply it to your character however you want. The mechanics are clear, the flavor is clear and flexible, which is exactly the kind of mechanics I love.
And you did you look over the Game Mastery Guide Ancestral Paragon rules?
No.
Okay.
Remind me.
Your version of this is quite more developed and interesting. Especially, I like how you've done it with the age rankings playing a part in it. But Ancestral Paragon is sort of hyped up Ancestry. It's the Game Mastery Guide's attempt to lean more towards the PF1 style of Ancestry, where you immediately start with 2 Ancestry feats, and then you gain them much more rapidly as you level up, as its default optional rule. It doesn't handle things as completely as your option does, but it is definitely a set of optional rules that's trying to address the same concept.
Yeah, so I've just loaded up the Ancestry Paragon rules from Archives of Nethys. There they say, instead of getting 1 at first level, 1 at 5th, 9th, 13th, and 17th, you start with 2, then you get 1 every odd level, 3rd, 5th, 7th. So you're actually getting way more Ancestry feats.
And that's just another way of addressing a similar concern for the character. Throughout this episode, I'm going to reference the Game Mastery optional rules where I think they're appropriate, because, hey, there's lots of optional rules in this game, and by lots of smart people, and I want to point out during this episode, the other ones you might want to consider, whether or not we came up with them or not.
Yeah, you were actually smart to reference the Game Mastery Guide, because I just had several clear ones in my head that I did not think the game addressed. But it has been a while since I've flipped through the Game Mastery Guide, and I should have confirmed. Dustin in chat, Kitsune Warlock, the No Direction Zone Dustin Knight, is saying that the Game Mastery Guide is more like Unearthed Arcana, or in Pathfinder terms, Pathfinder Unchained, than a traditional Game Mastery Guide. It really did introduce a whole lot of optional systems, which may be another one of those indicators that, yeah, maybe Pathfinder core rulebook did not land as smoothly as they wanted, and they saw right away that there were some refreshes. But it does make the Game Master Guide an extremely valuable tome, and one I believe we'll be referencing a lot tonight.
Yes. So my next thing is I'm actually swapping in one here that I was going to reference later, because it references what you have referenced, and it is the adoption option. In which I'm introducing a house rule that doesn't actually do anything. It just makes doing something more clear. All right. My proposed house rule for this is, since you can already achieve this using adoption and other various methods, and the game wasn't entirely clear in its wording as to whether or not you're allowed to do this anyway, but officially, in my 2.KD version of Ancestry feats, is as long as an Ancestry feat has a prerequisite you can meet, which means that you can't choose a heritage, you can't do anything like that, and you have to have all of the appropriate parts of your species in order to do it. So if you've got wings, you need wings to do this. All Ancestry feats are considered uncommon, unless it's your ancestry, in which case they're common. That way, it is explicit that you're allowed to take stuff across the aisle as long as your GM says okay.
So my next one is very similar to that, but much more complicated.
Oh my gosh, of course.
It is the Ancestry feat filter. So this was the main one. This and something similar, which I'll get into, were the main ideas I had when we were talking about house rules before last episode, when it was just like, hey, we're going to have, we could talk about house rules at some point. This was theoretical. Now I've actually fleshed it out. So it's the Ancestry feat filter, and it is to broaden, it's to create a open pool of Ancestry feats that anyone can spend their Ancestry feats on. And it's just using the ones that already exist. They're balanced, they're flavorful, they're useful. It's just removing the specific requirement that you need a specific ancestry for a lot of them. So the first thing you do is step one of this feat is the rarity. If the ancestry to which the feat was associated is uncommon or rare, apply the ancestry's rarity to the feat as a rarity trait. Otherwise, it's a clean slate. You ignore all the ancestry traits currently on the published version of the feat, but prerequisites and rarity remains. So then you ask a series of questions. Is the ancestry specifically named in the name of the feat or in the description? So like halfling lore. You couldn't just, not everyone knows halflings as well as halflings. And so the feats that are specifically ancestry lore, they retain that ancestry feat, and those ones are closed off. Then we get into the majority of the ancestry feats. So first of all, you have to go through your physiology steps. Does it grant an unarmed attack? As in, like, you don't have one, but you gain one. You need to have some indication that your class, that your ancestry should be able to gain this as an unarmed attack. So if art represents you having fangs, claws, a significantly beefy tail, then you could take an unarmed attack feat. Second of all, does it improve an existing unarmed attack? That's different. You can't just show, look, I've got claws in this picture, therefore I can have these improved claws. No, you actually have to have a rule that says you have claws as an unarmed attack before you can take one that improves an unarmed attack. Size. Does the feat description reference needing to be a certain size to use the feat, and that size is not listed as prerequisite? You list that size as prerequisite. Speed, same thing. Creature type, and this one gets a little bit broader. So if it talks about the type of creature you are, then that becomes a prerequisite. And this one came to be because I was going over all of the ancestries and just being like, does my existing filter not cover anything huge? And then I got to the Leshy, and it's like, it's all about producing seeds from your body. And it's like, no, that's all pretty specific to plants. So there's the odd Leshy feat that could be taken by any ancestry, but for the most part, the Leshy ones are super specific to Leshies. So you would have to add plant as prerequisite. That way, if they introduce more plant creatures in the future, it's not just specific to Leshy. It still applies. It's future-proofed. And then the other physical traits. So if the feat description implies a physical need to use the feat, such as having feathers or unusually large eyes, you can list that as a restriction as well, as a prerequisite. Then you go through the environment. If it's talking about you grew up in the forest, you grew up in the swamp, whatever, then it's not just that, well, elves tend to grow up in the forest, and therefore elves are the only one that get this forest-based feat. No, anyone that the description or your character calls out an environment, you now have access to this ancestry feat. Culture and history, same thing. Just because halflings have a history of being slaves and cheliacs doesn't mean halflings are the only ancestry that should have any feat that reflects that specific background, because they're not the only ones. They're just the ones that are most known for it. So if you go through the culture and the history and it makes sense for your character or for your ancestry, you can broaden it. You can apply a rarity tag on it if it's something that you just, as if your GM doesn't want that kind of thing to go out of control, because this is one of the ones that the niche of the ancestry could be sacrificed if it's just too broadly applied. So that's why I had a second layer of make sure that this is okay. And then I say audit. Oh, Perram.
No, you keep going. I need to do something real quick off of the camera.
All right. So the next step is then auditing it. You've gone through the full filter. You have more or less an idea of if this feat you're looking at applies to the character you want to give it to, but you have to make sure that everything that has been listed is appropriate and makes sense. So form of the feat is an example of a feat that grants a whole bunch of unarmed attacks. And so theoretically, it would have claws, hooves, bite, I believe, and a tail, all as traits on there. But because the feat only actually grants you one of those things when you take it, you would only need to meet one of those physiological traits in order to take the feat. And then qualify characters, the last step. What did I mean by that? After the ancestry feat filter applies and adds traits and prerequisites to the feat in question, you can determine if your character... Oh, okay, so that's just the final step. All of the feat's physiological traits must be mentioned or heavily implied. This is where it's going into. It has to be mentioned or just in the art or in the description of the ancestry. And then some steps might require interpretation. And I go over the lizard folk ancestry feats as an example of ancestry feats that might require interpretation. The parthenogenic hatchling references hatching from an egg, and so that would be a more specific trait that you would have to apply to it, or a prerequisite more would be better. Tail whip is another one that it's like, I can see why a lizard folk could get a tail attack, but I'm not sure a gnoll or a shuri, those are the dog people from Extinction Curse. Shuni, there we go. I don't think a Shuni qualifies for having a tail whip just because it's actually got a tail.
So I like that you have this really in-depth guided version to walk somebody through the decision-making process on this. I like keeping it simpler and letting the GM be that filter.
So there are multiple steps that does say consult your GM. So then in the end, I said some things might be up for interpretation. For example, if a feat description references the urban jungle, yes, technically jungle is in there, but you would not give it the jungle as an ancestry feat, even though the filter would give it that, because it's clearly a metaphorical jungle, and the intent has to be weighed. So there is one issue with the adopted ancestry, and actually your simpler version does not necessarily address it. And that is natural ambition. So natural ambition is a human ancestry feat, which gives you a first level class feat. It is the main reason people take adopted ancestry.
Right.
By this filter, any ancestry could take this at first level, which does kind of scrub the human niche, because that first level feat, that's something that they got in first edition. It's the main reason to play a human in second edition. And even though you can take it for adopted ancestry is a general feat. Characters only get their first general feat at third level. So it's at least 2 levels where humans are the only ones that get this. And it's a significant 2 levels because it's a first level class feat. And so like it will have the most impact at those first 2 levels. And so I don't have a solution. I have 3 possible solutions. One of them is to treat natural ambition like any other feat and just say, well, the filter says anyone can take it, so anyone can take it. Second one is treat it as an exception and say, despite what the filter says, this is a human ancestry trait. If you want it, take adopted ancestry. And the third is change the rules of ancestry traits for ancestry feats, where characters can take ancestry feats regardless of ancestry traits, but characters of the specified ancestry gain earlier access to the feat. The filter would probably need a new step early on that increases the ancestry level of all feats with an ancestry tag by 1 or 2, and then a special rule that says characters of the specified ancestry treat it as 1 or 2 levels lower, which is the kind of backdoor option that I don't like. Second edition has too many of, but is also the most complete fix for this problem. Oh, Jaina B, option 4. No one can take it.
Oh no! It's such a problematic feat, and it totally was a problematic feat in all versions of human that have ever existed. It's what makes humans humans, but also is the reason why humans are often considered too strong. I don't know what to take about this. As I would say, the best way to do it is to make it the exception. Like a one-off exception for that one in your version of the rules would be how I would do it. Because if we could apply blind filters in non-judging games, game systems to make decisions like this, there would be no reason for game designers to exist. There occasionally we have to make judgment calls.
Well, I mean, we are putting this out to the patrons, and so if some of them do just try it with anyone can take it, and they find people aren't taking it because there are more flavorful options, cool, then we don't need to apply that exception. Exceptions really should be the exception, not the rule. Smart Goblin in chat is already weighing in, saying humans only. I think because this ancestry feat filter opens up so many more options, it makes that first level class feat less seductive. Like there are more options other than trying to get that first level feat. There's more ways you can spend your ancestry feats. So I think that we would be okay making it an exception and saying that this is a human trait only. Yeah. And it's not like we're going to get another human-like ancestry in a future book, and so it's not future-proofed anymore. This is very specific to humans, and humans are the ones that you will never see another human-like ancestry because all the ancestries are kind of human-like.
Yeah, and it's like the one feat in the whole game that breaks the rules of the system that they established, where you're not supposed to be able to cross the silos in the default version of the game, and this is like right square center. One of the first feats you'll ever read crosses the silos, and then you never see it again. But it's there's a reason that this is problematic.
Well, the limitation of it being first level class feats and not just spend your ancestry feats on class feats that is a smart limitation, because you can only be so good at the basics before you get tired of them and want to move on.
Yeah. So my next proposal is one to address the power. This was actually going to be my previous one, but this is to address the power balance of the game. And that is, it's one of a 1-2 punch combo. But the punch 2 is in the game mastery guide as it is. But the 1 punch is simple. We've complained that the game is balanced to really, really encourage that 18 in your primary stat, to the point that I would say it's required. And then there will be people that will respond to me that say, no, it's not required. You can do it on a 16. A 16 of the stat is fine. I run the math, and the game is hard enough when you have that 18. When you lose that 18, you are extra in a bad place. And if you assume that the 16 was the balancing point for this game, then man, that makes this game's balance super rough. Super rough. But my solution to this is your key ability score, whatever it ends up being at the end of your character creation, is just automatically 18. You don't have a choice. You can't accidentally make it lower. You can't accidentally make it higher. You are just, that is it. Because the game has such an assumption that you're going to have it anyway, you don't have the choice. Boom, it is 18. If it's your key ability stat, 18. To balance this off a little bit, even though I don't really think you might need to, you might want to only give them 3 free races at the end of character creation instead of the 4th one. You'll still end up with a much more surplus in making your character a little bit stronger by making them more survivable, or you're boosting your secondary stats up as a result of this. But simply put, it takes away the chance that you might, quote unquote, screw up your character when you're building it by not knowing that you were supposed to really, really, really push for a very high key ability score. And it will also help balance out the fact that the game is probably a little bit too hard as it is anyway, by giving you those extra points in other areas and making your character a little bit more survivable or more accurate, or to shore up the areas that will help your character make it through these very rough dungeons and kind of ease the need from having to give a free level to your characters to achieve the same effect.
So part of me dislikes this.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the me specific part of me that dislikes it. I find I get a lot of inspiration from the subtext of the ability scores, and just automatically going up to an 18 feels like it is scrubbing the subtext. And so I need to find different ways to be inspired to what my character is and how to play them and whatever. But I know that's much more specific to me than most people. And I cannot argue that this definitely solves the problem of you absolutely need that, so you might as well just make it so.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 instead of 4, I don't think that's necessary, because I think that one of my big objections to 18 being the balancing point is how little options you get for the rest of your character. You cannot just be like, I'm going to give this fighter a particularly high intelligence just to see how that plays out, which is something I would do with first edition characters. At least if I have the 4, my significantly high intelligence for a fighter would probably be 12, but at least I have the chance to do 12 and to be able to say he's smarter than the average fighter. So absolutely love that it clearly addresses what the game wants, so you might as well just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Why pretend there's an option that isn't really there?
Yeah, I would prefer that the game itself be balanced around 16 being the assumption. Honestly, that's how I would like it. But if that's true, then the game balance is even further off than I worry it is by default. And if it isn't true, which is what I actually suspect, and that 18 is the assumption, then this solves the problem. I would very much rather the game not be requiring an 18 in your primary stat like Starfinder does. It kind of is balanced around 16. But as long as we're not but that would require remaking the entire game system and redoing all the math, and we're already kind of achieving the same result when we're recommending kicking your game up a level. So yeah, this is just the easiest and least intrusive way I can achieve the same result in the game. Make the game easier for new players to build characters, because I can't tell you how many new players that I've had to pull to the side and say, your character's a wizard. You have 14 in intelligence. You can do that, but you probably don't want to. And I would say this is more than just, it's not a good idea to have low intelligence as a wizard. It's, you're probably going to regret playing your character long term because the game balance assumes that you don't have 14 intelligence as a wizard.
All right. Nice and simple.
Mm-hmm.
My last one, which surprises me because when I started writing my pf2.kd, I was sure I had 4 ideas. And then when I was done the third one, I was like, I'm done, which means I've forgotten something along the way, Perram.
Oh, no!
Which is just the reality of being Ryan, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So the last one is combat feats and metamagic feats. This is similar to the Ancestry feat filter in its intent, but I feel like this is actually relieving some pressure that the game is putting on itself. The description of class feats in the core rulebook is that it is a special feat that only members of that class can access. That is a lie in certain circumstances. Metamagic feats, in fact, the same metamagic feats apply or appear on multiple class lists. So right from the core rulebook, the rules acknowledge that there are certain rules that just all casters will want access to. And it's not all metamagic feats, but there are a whole bunch of them that are just like, these are the generic metamagic feats. If you are a caster, not even all the strong casters, some of the ones that aren't considered primary casters still need these metamagic feats as an option. And so that should just be a pool of metamagic feats that anyone that has a caster class ability, actually, let me pull open the core rulebook just to make sure I'm getting my terminology right. No, why am I opening the core rulebook when I've already got the Archives of Nethys open? So let's go over to Sorcerer. And so if you are, there we go. If you are trained in spell DCs, then you automatically qualify for this pool of metamagic feats, which allows you to trade a class feat for a feat from the metamagic feat pool. Now, I have not refined this filter yet because there's a lot of nuance to the class feats, a lot more so than the Ancestry feats. So, like, there's a lot of metamagic feats that are very specific to the class. Bard has a whole bunch about making a performance. Druids have some that are specific to Wild Shape, I believe. Anyway, they're specific to some Druid-specific thing. So it really does have to be the ones that appear on multiple lists. So to get an actual mechanical filter on there, I'm going to have to keep working on this. But the intent is that the ones that appear on multiple lists, those should just be in the generic pool. If you are a caster, you can access them. Likewise, why do we love the Ancestry so much in the APG? Because they take the combat feats that were
the archetypes, not Ancestries.
Thank you. Yes, the archetypes. One of the appeals of the archetypes is that they break the silos a little bit, and they say, like, oh, if you want to be an archer but you're a barbarian, you can just take the take the archer archetype. It's like, well, what if we remove that step and just say, here are the combat feats that are just combat feats. And if you have a certain training, a certain proficiency in martial weapons, you can access them. And one of the potential issues, or one of the potential objections to this, is that that would then strip the fighter the fighter of all of its class feats, because barbarian has a niche. Ranger kind of had a niche. That niche was completely cannibalized by all the archetypes in the APG. And the Ranger is the one class that it's like, I don't think it needs to exist anymore. But anyway, like, unarmed combat is the monk's niche. So there are these niches. The fighter's niche is just, it gets a whole bunch of options. And I think everyone should have equal access to those options. But by making a prerequisite based on the proficiency level of the class that got that combat feat when they got it, which means for a fighter, you have to be an expert to get those, which means any other combat class gets it at, what is it, 5th level, that the barbarian 7th level. So that means that is 6 levels where the fighter still has exclusive access to those feats that are technically the fighter feat, which is the fighter still being the best at fighting, but not the only one that can do those fighting moves. And anyone can then pick up their champion and be like, I want to do a champion with this really cool sword swipe. I want to be a barbarian with power attack. You now have access to it without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. You just can, because there is the combat feats pool and there is the metamagic feats pool, that are pools that anyone can access, assuming you meet the prerequisites.
So one of my rules coming up was an attempt at doing the same thing, but mine was different and maybe not as graceful. I decided to make 3 new silos. One was called Combat, because combat feat. One was called Graceful. This is for your sneaky, dodgy, cool, roguey stuff, or your investigatory stuff. And the other feat silo was going to be Mystic, for your magically casty stuff. And simply put, every class will define itself as one of those types, or multiple of those types. So there would be a chart with all the different classes and just assigning them to which of these types they are. So, fighter would be the combat class, and you might end up with Magus, that is the combat mystic class. And simply put, if you have this as either your class or you took a multi-class dedication feat, you gain access to that silo pool based on your class. And you have to meet all prerequisites to take the feat. And that would solve all of the problem with the ones that were very much meant to be, this is a druidy thing, because those feats require you to have class abilities that you won't have if you don't have that class. So I didn't, when I was running through the feats to see how this would work, in almost all circumstances, I didn't need to make special rules, because this is one that obviously would want to be gated off because this is super druidy. But I can't wild shape anyway. So I'm never going to be able to take this unless I multi-class into druid to get wild shaping.
I am surprised how broadly that applies. Because one of the reasons I just stuck with combat feats and metamagic feats was because I really did think that there were that many class feats that were relevant only to that class. So I am surprised to hear that, other than that's the exception, and that for the most part, anyone that falls into that category can take them. That is surprising, but also good to know.
Yeah, because the stuff that you would want to gate rely on stuff that your class gives you that aren't available as feats, or maybe they are available as a feat, but that means that you would have to then take that feat and then take the next feat and then take the next feat. And if it was available as a feat and didn't require a class ability that you can't take as a feat, then why shouldn't it just be another feat?
Yeah. Yeah, I would be much happier with my character creation options if I had a much broader pool rather than the narrow class specific silo.
Right.
Oh, and actually, in the playtest, Andrew Sturdivant pointed out that the Magus, one of the one where you hit somebody and you get knowledge about them, that's a fighter feat that the Magus just plain got. So what you're one of your examples where the Magus would be a class that gets access to 2 different pools, it already does.
Right.
Yeah, like the reason that I'm calling these hacks instead of house rules sometimes is because this feels like the game already does this and resists doing this at the same time.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff and a lot of what we're making is because we are familiar with a little bit of how the game works underneath the hood from experience and from talking with people that have worked on the game, etc., etc. So a lot of the stuff we are designing are literally just, this is how the game actually does work if you know how you're looking at it. That's why we're designing them like we are and making the choices we are. And we hope that this document, when we put it together, will be still result in a balanced, fun version of Pathfinder 2, not a crazy Monty Hall version of Pathfinder 2. I still have more house rules after this.
Sure, I'm interested in that, but I'm just going to say that, like, in doing my I did put a lot of work into these 3, especially the Ancestry filter. But the only thing that I would say I did that was clever was applying the age as a filter for how many Ancestry feats. Everything else I thought was fairly low-hanging fruit and was stuff we were saying since the playtest. It's just now we've codified it, and we had to do it as alternate rules because for whatever reason the design team really stuck to the guns that classes had to be very siloed and limited, and options had to be very specific to the classes, which might not be so frustrating if the game wasn't so hard.
Right. Honestly, before PF2 was announced, right before PF2 was announced, I was working with a publisher on a version, on a hack for Pathfinder First Edition to make it a classless game. And Pathfinder 2 did a whole lot of that legwork. In order to get us close to that, it would take a trivial amount of work that maybe I'll look into, or we look into, I don't know. But it would take a trivial amount of work to keep filing away some of those serial numbers and silos and turn the game entirely into, you have like D20 Modern, you have these set archetypes like you were talking about last episode, that are just very, very basic archetypes, and you now have access to the whole of the game in terms of class abilities and feats when you build your character. The game is balanced tight enough that would not even be close to breaking it. It would just make it a lot more complicated to make a character, a little bit less newbie friendly, and that is a version of this game that could be very easily written.
So I did expand on some of the thoughts I was saying. I said last episode, I expanded on it in our Discord in the patron section, because Lidis specifically had a lot of follow-up questions. And when I said to limit Pathfinder to 4 classes, maybe, I don't think we had the same perception of that, because I do not want Pathfinder to be a classless system. I do like the classes. And in my statement, I was even like, all right, so thinking about it, 6 is too few classes, but the 12 that we got is too many. And so like, I could see the 4 pillars, like wizard, rogue, fighter, and cleric. But I do think that the game has room for either the sorcerer as its own class, or really expand what the wizard is and have that a basic option. And I do think the monk or the brawler would have been a good candidate for a base class. But the barbarian and the ranger, one of them can go. And the APG says it's the ranger, because the ranger has nothing. Yeah, you want an animal companion? Anyone can get an animal companion, because of a general feat, I believe. Or anyway, there's definitely the archetype. Archer, anyone can do. 2-weapon fighter. It's nothing. The ranger is nothing at this point, except for a superficial silo for feats that have been redispersed through the archetypes.
And also, like, there's a reason that I'm not proposing that as part of my hacks and house rules, or the 2-point KD version of the game, because it definitely is taking the game down a completely different flavor, making a much more fundamental change to it to get rid of those identities, etc. I'm just saying that as we're poking this and looking under the hood could even be removed. But that would be a completely optional. That would be further down this rabbit hole than we intend to go with this project.
Well, Luis Loza, No Direction Zone Luis, and Paizo developer Luis Loza is in chat saying he's had an idea for a classless 2E in his head for a while. He thinks you two should chat.
Yeah, Luis, let's go chat
frankly,
sometime.
You should chat with Luis more often. Luis is awesome.
I've been chatting with Luis this week.
Good. Also of note is Sheppy saying that Sheppy, the artist for the adventurous character art, and and the Valiant character art, and just an amazing artist and friend of the show, says that if his friends want more choices, he just lets them have almost everything.
Right.
And that is one thing about what we're doing. It is the long way of saying, just let them do it, and you as the GM be the final arbiter. Yeah, that I cannot argue that some of the systems are a little bit indulgent, but I really did want to meet that future-proof goal, and I didn't want it to just be like, it's Pathfinder, but ignore the rules and do whatever you want.
And honestly, this is a testament to how well the game is balanced. Now, that goes against something I said. The game itself is balanced to a certain difficulty. I think that difficulty was tuned too hard, but the game itself is a very robust system that works, and works well as intended or as designed, ? But it will survive doing these what would be considered absolutely game breaking in previous versions of the game, because it is well designed enough that you can do things like perform against a fort DC is a valid mathematical equation. You would have to come up with the flavor of what that would be. Is this like the culturally represented dwarven fart jokes, and whether or not you can manage to stomach staying in the audience? That would but the game is well enough balanced that taking off these restrictions and getting rid of them doesn't actually break the game. It just changes its expectations.
Yeah, and actually, so earlier when I was talking about how the game mastery guide, it being so full of subsystems, could imply that there might have been some reaction to the core rulebook. But Dustin, who was the one who brought up the game mastery guide in chat, he quickly said, like, no, actually, I think it's shows how strong it is that you can have the game with all these different subsystems and alternate rules, and it's still a strong game. Like it doesn't fall apart.
Right. I mean, honestly, I think that because of the way the game is balanced and how it's a little bit different from D20, I think it's intimidating people against doing some more radical house rules and rules. Like I've listened to designers bemoan making PF2 classes because of how involved it is and stuff. And the game is robust and interwoven, and it is a complicated clockwork moving smoothly. And I do think that some of that has intimidated people into exploring some of the design spaces that are right to be explored. But the game definitely has that as an option. And I hope that as more and more designers become more and more comfortable working with it, we start to see some of these more ambitious transformations.
So there is some news we do have to talk about. I think we've got 15 minutes to go through the last couple of your house rules, if you think that'll cover it.
Yeah. So my last 2 house rules are the only ones that I'm going to have. Actually, I have 3 house rules, but one of them is kind of like question mark because we don't know how it's going to work out in the end. But my last 2 house rules are the only ones that pertain to spellcasting. This was not going to be the Perram rants about spellcasting balance in the game episode. But I do have 2 spellcasting specific things that I would change about the default balance of the game, and this is after hundreds and hundreds of hours of playing and game mastering this game. So I have seen this at work and at play a lot. And I would dare to say that there are not very many people alive, and of those, most of them freelance or work at Paizo, that has played this game as much as I have. And that is downcasting. I've said this from the beginning. I have yet to see any good reason that this shouldn't be the case. That should become the default assumption for 2E, and that is absolutely what this needs to do. What this means is, if you are a wizard, you probably don't even know what this is. Because if you're a prepared spellcaster, which means wizard or cleric or druid, or, a whole bunch of them, you don't have to worry about this. But if you were a sorcerer or a bard or some other spellcaster where you were having to introduce with this heightened spell and preferred spells and signature spells, it's real complicated and it seems real spiteful that you have to use one of your very limited number of spells known to learn the same spell again and again and again and again, just to make it stronger and take advantage of the heightened system. And keep in mind, the heightened system is already a nerf. It is a nerf of free scaling, which is what spells used to be in PF1, where spells just got stronger as you leveled up your low-level spell slot. Suddenly, Magic Missile was throwing 5 missiles around, and you didn't spend any more. It was wonderful. It was also probably unbalanced as hell. But when Starfinder came around and the Occult Guide came around, they introduced this concept of leveled spells and downcasting, which is all heightening is. So all this means is you learn the highest level of the spell. And then you get to retrain the lower level of spells when you level up. You want to be able to throw around Fireball as a high level Fireball? Just learn it as one of your highest level spells, and then you may freely cast all the lower level ones you want. This replaces the signature spell options, which is kind of like a weird hack to achieve a something similar result, and is clunky as heck based on the core assumption of the game. And it is elegant. It's worked in dozens of previous versions of the game. It works in Starfinder. It worked in PF2. I see no reason on earth that we needed to reinvent this wheel, especially since it disproportionately affects one of the types of spellcasters, which are already being nerfed too much. It's not even the ones I like to play. I look at the sorcerer, and I look at the bard, and I go, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that you have to deal with this. No, just downcasting. That's the way the game should totally be done. Secondly, undercasting is what Descriptivus is screaming. Okay, undercasting. I'm not sure. I like downcasting, but I'm not sure if that's the right word. Anyway.
Well, it's heightened, so I feel like it should be the opposite of heightened, which would be lower casting.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, my second rule about spellcasting is the infamous incapacitate trait. And I'm not going to ask that it be removed. even though part of me really thinks it should be removed. And the reason is because higher level monsters already have a disproportionately higher level of ways to resist and not get hit by your whammy spells. That crits of those spells are already going to be exceptionally less likely, and that we don't need to worry too much about the fact that that rare circumstance might actually end up happening, and occasionally a boss might get one shot. Because they're already resistant to it by nature of being higher level than you, and the system was already built with that. But let's leave it in play. I think that it is too punishing that what it does right now is that all of your success conditions or save conditions get lowered by 1 rank right now, which does, yes, prevent the criticals from happening that one-shot the boss or take the unit off the field. But it also means that your successes become failures, your failures become critical failures, your critical failures become, I don't know, you hurt yourself. You decided, I want to use this ray of death and point it right at my own eyeball. No, you don't need to do that. I suggest that the wording of that ability be changed to simply, if it is a saving throw, critical failures become failures. And then stop. Failures are still failures. Just let because the spells that you need to worry about, the parts of that you need to worry about happen on those crits. That's where they've been rebalanced to be the one-shot game-ending whammy spells. And this achieves the same effect that they were really supposed to, that the trait is supposed to address, without basically making those spells completely worthless. I've since learned that you don't use these spells if it has the incapacitate trait against anything that you would want to use those spells on, because you want to use those spells on dangerous monsters, but dangerous monsters are immune to them.
Yeah, that reflects one of the frustrating ways that Pathfinder 2nd Edition is hard, in that it often feels like there are 2 separate, elegant solutions to the same problem. And combined, it feels like it's just a heavy whacking with a Nerf stick.
Yeah. This is the same reason I was ranting yet last episode about the Magus's teleport ability being 15.
The 12.5 foot, 12.
Which becomes 10 feet. Yeah, it's like, why was that even necessary? I get it. You want to make it. Or why the synthesis version of the Magus, the summoner, can't be nice to play as. It's intentionally nerfing yourself. It's like literally you take that feat and you become a worse summoner.
You say that, but did you listen to the playtest?
No.
That is the summoner that Alex made, and it was ridiculous and also unrecognizable as a summoner.
Yes, but he since talked to me after the fact, and it was still very much a nerfed version of himself.
That's okay. Anyway, I actually do want to talk about that in the news section, so we'll get to that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But you have one last thing here on this list that I now have access
to. The part of this playtest I really liked is how the summoners and summons work with actions, and absolutely think that totally should be the way all companions should work, where you have, like, right now companions have this whole thing where you spend an action to give them 2 actions and they act, and it's kind of complicated and weird. Maybe you just share an action pool like you do with the summoners. Not all the other summon stuff, like the hit points and saves and all that jazz. No, that's unique to summoners. But I think that the sharing the action pool is a much more elegant solution to the same problem that they're trying to address. There's a whole feat line in each of those classes that mirror each other of doing it with, you get bonus actions and then they get to do things, act on their own. But the summoner has its own variations. I just think that the summoner, as presented in the beta, is the more elegant solution to the same problem. I don't want there to exist 2 different versions of solving the same problem. And we're back.
In case you're wondering what just happened, we had some technical difficulties with Perram's internet connection on the live recording, and so we are picking up where we left off because there was too much big news that we want to cover in this episode, and we could not just leave it hanging. Before we do that, though, Perram, that's the first draft of the PF 2-point KD house rules that we are going to be releasing. The plan as it stands is to release them on Monday or Tuesday to Patreon, along with the recording of the Private Sanctum that comes after this episode. And it's going to be a fairly rough draft. It's going to be basically the notes we were working off of, and we're going to encourage people to give us their feedback. So if you are a patron, what should you do?
If you're a patron, you should go to the 2.KD channel that's going to be posted into the Discord Patreon, where we will be discussing this. Only patrons will have access to this channel. We'll be shopping it. We'll be wanting to get your feedback on the document. All the links to the documents will be there. They'll also be over at patreon.com/nodirection, which you can get to by clicking on the Patreon link at nodirectionpodcast.com. But on that Discord channel is where we're going to be doing most of our shop housing, so we can keep it all in one place. We really, really, really want your feedback and ideas on this, because we want to make a document that adequately describes how No Direction prefers to play its Pathfinder.
Is shop housing a term?
Maybe not. But,
it seems right, but I'd never heard the term before. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we're going to be doing. Scarl. I called you my daughter's name, Perram. What is happening?
Your daughter is named Scarl? Your daughter has the coolest name ever.
Scar or Scarl. And Scarlet and Abigail as sisters are the Scabby sisters.
Less cool now. But I can just imagine her having her own G.I. Joe card, like Cobra's newest agent, Scarl.
What's great was when she was like 2 and got a pretty bad scratch on her face, and we're calling her Scar.
Mm-hmm. Works. I mean, that's not going to have any downsides whatsoever, and she is never going to murder her sister by throwing her into a herd of buffalo.
No, because Abby's the younger sister. We'll be right back with the Pathfinder news right after this. They were wildebeests, not buffalo.
I'm leaving the wildebeest correction in. And, as I can...
Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news.
And we're back.
In the Pathfinder news segment, we talk about all the latest happenings for the Pathfinder role-playing game, from Paizo itself, from licensees, from third-party publishers, or just things that the community has put together that we think are worthy of note. And right off the top, we were talking about a big announcement from Paizo. PAX Online was last weekend, or the weekend before. PAX Online was recently. And because there was no rush to announce everything at Gen Con like usual, Paizo decided this year they would spread out some of the big announcements. So we actually got the announcement of the next hardcover in the Lost Omens line, as well as the next adventure path. These were both announced, and they tie into each other.
Mm-hmm. Very excitingly.
We've got Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse. Perram, you know the setting better than I do. What's so cool about the Mwangi Expanse?
So the Mwangi Expanse is sort of the Africa analog for Pathfinder. Specifically, it's the big jungle expanse where all sorts of cool temples and weird freaking dinosaur creatures and lots of amazing cultures are there. It also has the Magambia Academy, which is founded by Old Mage Jatumbe, who is one of my favorite characters in all of Pathfinder. And also, if you remember me just like really ranting about how awesome some of his stuff was back at the tail end of Pathfinder First Edition, I'm really hopeful that this means we'll get to see some of that, which is he basically developed and invented magic in Galarian as people spellcast, like actual spellcasters and wizards and prepared casters pretty much owe almost everything to Old Mage Jatumbe. And the Magambia Academy was his founding, and where a lot of his original traditions of magic, him and the Magic Warriors, which was another group founded by Old Mage Jatumbe. And it's just so lore rich, and mechanically it's this blending of like what would be considered druid magic or primal magic, but studied like academically, like a wizard would. So those archetypes were some of my favorite archetypes to play around with in first edition. And so I very, very much love seeing this culture, this history, this setting, and these characters like revived and coming back. And we've had a whole lot of Mwangi content in Pathfinder 2nd Edition since its launch. A whole book of Age of Ashes takes place there. The Slithering, this really, really cool kind of creepy adventure, takes place there. We've got a just a wealth of options coming out of this area that just basically towards the last couple of years of first edition just started really getting a lot of spotlight time and development. And also, if you look at Lost Omens Legends and you see old Mage Jatumbe sitting there having a chat with Baba Yaga, you just know you want more of that.
And we are getting more of that because the Strength of Thousands adventure path is set in the Magambia Academy of the Mwangi Expanse.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked the explanation for the title, that Strength of Thousand refers to how there have been so many students that have gone to the Magambia Academy before you, and that as a student there, you are the benefactor of the strength of the thousands of students that have come before you, that no one just comes to learn, everyone comes to learn and contribute equally, and making every new class stronger than the last. And so this is a Magic Academy school, and it's set in the Magambia, which is, I would say, the most famous Magic Academy in the Pathfinder setting. And it's already been said that the character creation rules are going to reflect the fact that you have to be of particular power to even enroll into the strength into the Magambia. And so even though you will start as first level characters, you're going to have character creation options that will make you stronger than the average Pathfinder character.
And it's a magical academy. I wonder how they're going to address that. I mean, this isn't a place that non-magical characters will really be able to do a lot of studying, is there?
Well, the seminar at PAX Online, Ron Lundeen, who is developing the adventure path, went into that, and he did say that you can play any class, but you will have access to magic. So if you are playing a straight fighter, you will still be given some kind of magical power at character creation, which is part of what he was saying was shows that you are the stronger than the average Pathfinder character.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Because like I said, like one of the biggest groups associated with the Magambia Academy and Archmage Jatumbe was the Magic Warriors, and they were very much heavy on the warrior part. So definitely some of the most archetypal Maguses in the setting would be a good comparison there. But I guess lots of combat-focused druids would also qualify there. Of course, we're talking about rules justifications for storyline elements, and those change frequently based on how you choose to express a character concept. And there were so many different ways to do that in first and coming through second edition.
Now, that seminar at PAX Online, you had Luis Loza from Paizo, also from the No Direction Network. He's the developer, or one of the developers in charge of the Lost Omens line. You had Ron Lundeen from Paizo, also from No Direction, who is the developer on the Adventure Path line. And then you had a third voice, freelancer Ali Bustian. And she was there because they really wanted to show that Paizo was making an effort to make sure that this, African analog Adventure Path and hardcover book would not be put together by the largely white staff of Paizo. They wanted to make sure that they were getting voices that could accurately contribute their experience to the adventure path and to the setting, and make sure that they were getting different perspective than we were used to, which will help flavor these options, make them feel a little more authentic, and make them stand out from the general fare that Paizo has put out before.
Which I think is incredibly important if you're going to be tackling a book and adventure path this high profile, especially during this time when we're having certain conversations about diversity and inclusion and what it means to be a fantasy setting that doesn't mean that it needs to be just another King Arthur Beowulf analog. And good grief, if we've not seen some amazing content put forward from all sorts exploring that. Just look at the popularity of the Black Panther movies and those. Look at Mr. Nancy in American Gods and how much people really love that character and those expressions, and honestly, one of the biggest reasons I'm excited about this book is so that I have an excuse to play a giant talking magic spider again.
Oh, that's true. Hold on. We know several of the ancestries that are going to be in Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse. I believe there's 3, and Noel is one of them. And I believe your giant spider ancestry, which you can remind me of the name of.
Aradni?
That sounds about right. I believe the Eradni will be one of the other 3 Ancestries. I don't have
now,
it handy.
It is worth mentioning that there has been some flux in how that particular ancestry has been represented throughout the books. So the exact names, expressions, and what exactly it actually is likely to change. My preference is very much for the gigantic, fluffy rainbow jumping spider version, not the pseudo Ettercap version that we saw in Age of Ashes.
All right, so I do have the list now. There are 6 Ancestries. Knoll, a Natty.
That's it. That's
a Natty. Okay.
A Natty.
Yours sounded more spider-like, so when I didn't see it on the list, I was worried that maybe I was wrong, that this ancestry won't be in there. But yes, it will be the Knoll, the Anati, the Gripply, frog people, Galoma. Offhand, do you know who the Galoma are?
Not a clue.
What about the Conrasu?
Not a clue.
And the Shisk?
Nope.
Well.
Yeah, sorry.
You will know.
But the Gripply are another, they were very important in Age of Ashes as an ancestry, so not surprised there, because they were one of the 2 major ancestries that you dealt with inside of the Mwangi Expanse during that part of Age of Ashes, and they were definitely portrayed in a much more sympathetic light than traditionally portrayed. So I was sort of waiting for them to be announced as a playable ancestry any day now.
Yes, I'm on the Pathfinder wiki right now in the entry for Natambu, which is the city that the Mwangi... Oh, no, sorry. It is the city-state in the Mwangi Expanse. Sorry, is it where... Yeah, it is where the Magambia is. That's what I was about to say, and then I thought I was wrong. So it does list the Galoma, Shisks, and Conrasu as ancestries for the area, but when I click on them, none of them have populated pages yet. So this seems like it's going to be the first we're really going to be exploring those 3 ancestries, while the other 3 ancestries are more familiar, especially Gnolls. They're a staple of fantasy fiction. I know. Usually not as a playable race.
And Gnolls have, in Pathfinder specifically, have not been portrayed all that friendly. They've pretty much focused on Gnolls being this slaver pirate species, and in almost every instance that we see them, it's either in that light or as these monstrous Rovagug worshippers.
Well, there are always exceptions,
I'm sure, but I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But I'm just saying, goodness,
I'm saying a lot of what you just said is a bad thing.
Well, they're bad people. That's their role in the story, was to be bad people in those stories. I'm just saying that we haven't seen a lot of expressions of different Gnolls in the setting yet. All we've seen is pirate monster worshipping slaver Gnolls.
What Paizo has gone back and forth about whether their campaign setting lines will directly tie into the adventure path lines and the adventures they put out. They did it for a while. There was Cheliax's books released when the first Cheliax's adventure path came out. When the Jade Regent, the adventure path came out, there was all kinds of Dragon Empire material, some of the most
and that's when they stopped.
Exploration. Yes, because it was challenging, and sometimes it caused more problems than it solved when there were contradictions between the adventure path and the content, because they were made in parallel, and so it was harder to coordinate. I think modern technology like Discord allows project managers to work together to make sure there are fewer of these contradictions. Plus, the Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse is coming out in June 2021, whereas the Adventure Path is coming late 2021. So it feels like, as they are developing the Adventure Path, Ron can consult Luis and Eleanor, who work on the Lost Omens line, and say, if we do this in the Adventure Path, how does that relate to the book? And since the Mwangi Expanse will be coming out first, that'll probably have the authority on the area, and then Ron will have to react. So it's a small window, but with advanced technology and more experience on Paizo's part, I believe this might be the ideal way to tie in campaign setting and adventure path material releases.
In my opinion, they probably just got gun shy because of the less than stellar performance of the Dragon Empire's material. And I think that I'm glad they're getting back to it, because I think that that's a smarter choice. I think it makes for a much more broad and supportive stuff. And honestly, the game system since that time, until they started to come back to it towards the latter half of Pathfinder 2, Pathfinder First Edition's life. It just felt really disjointed and kind of random, and it didn't have that unified depth and quality of the material that I was used to from my Galarian stuff. There is a benefit when your adventure path and your campaign setting book and your player companion book all agree to develop the same ideas for a little bit. You get to have a richness and a depth and a quality of exploration of these ideas that isn't possible if you are limiting yourself on page counts and a particular version of an expression. And by doing these broad sweeps like they used to do, and that seems that we're getting back to, we get to see the Mwangi Expanse in the pure glory that it could be presented as, because it's getting all of its chance to spread its 8 spidery, colorful appendages and cast all its magic spells. And that is something that I think Pathfinder has that a lot of other game systems just does not have. One of the biggest strengths that Pathfinder has as both a game, a setting, and a company and a product is that it has this massive amount of material that goes out. And whereas a lot of other options in this space are very limited or very short or very fire and forget expressions of these concepts. And this is something that I want them to continue to do. And I'm glad they did it. And I think that the game suffered for a little bit when they got away from it.
Another difference here from when Dragon Empires and Jade Region came out, that was, here's the source material about this area, here's the adventure path about going to and exploring that area. Here we're getting the Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse, but then Magambia Academy is about the school. It's about being a student at a Magic Academy. It's set in Mwangi Expanse. Mwangi Expanse will play a role as the setting, but the thrust of the adventure is not just Mwangi Expanse. It's Mwangi Expanse, Magic Academy, the hijinks that students at a Magic Academy get up to.
Yeah. And plus, like, I'm pretty sure that the plan was to have a lot more of these products closer together in the schedule before certain delays happen, because we have this, it's no coincidence that the Slithering was set in the Mwangi Expanse, and Age of Ashes and Extinction Curse both have Mwangi elements in them. So this was obviously part of the plan for a while now. And I think that we would have even seen it even tighter together if certain delays due to various difficulties at running a company during the time of COVID weren't affecting things.
Actually, we've been acting like the exploration of the Mwangi Expanse is the first time in a long time they've been doing this setting and adventure rules. Yeah, but like they just did that with Absalom,
right?
Which Absalom, the city at the center of the world hardcover book is delayed, but I believe scheduled to come out in January.
And it was going to launch with Dead God's Hand and Extinction Curse,
Agents of Edgewatch.
Yeah, Agents of Edgewatch.
The beginner box starts there. Yeah, this is actually becoming the new norm, and I don't know why it stood out more here.
And over in the Pathfinder Society land, Absalom has been a heavy focus lately, and at the latter part of First Edition's seasons, and also the Mwangi Expanse. We've been going there fairly frequently in Pathfinder Society for a while now. I mean, some of my favorite adventures take place there.
Do you want to just throw out one of your favorite adventures before we move on?
I'm trying to remember its name, but it's the one where you go and you're trying to hunt this tiger and you're on this safari expedition. There's also the other one where you're exploring the snake. I forget their names, but the other one is where you're exploring the snake temple and all these horrific snake monsters happen. But more importantly, swarms of monkeys attack, and it's awesome.
Okay, that's the one we played together, right?
Yeah.
Will ran it for us? Yeah.
Yeah. Monkey swarms. I've played the Monkey Swarm one so many times. It's one of my go-tos.
Wow.
Also, you're going to go there, Mwangi Expanse, and it's also super important anytime you're dealing with the shackles or a lot of the pirate material, because the Eye of Abendigo is off the coast there. So when you're fueling up or stopping by or engaging in any part of those adventures that involve not a giant tornado hurricane full of horrible undead monstrosities, you're going to be in Mwangi.
Next item up is kind of a follow-up to last episode and what we were just talking about earlier. And the main reason I'm putting this as a news item is just kind of to clear any confusion up about our feelings about Pathfinder 2nd Edition and the Secrets of Magic playtest, because the reason that we did today's first segment was because of the review of the Secrets of Magic playtest document. But in between those two episodes, we did do No Direction did Secrets of Magic playtest one-shot where Vanessa wasn't the GM. It was Dustin Knight. Dustin Knight ran us through a modified version of his Pathfinder Society quest, Wayfinder Origins, where I played a Magus and Alex played a Summoner. And then Andrew Sturdivant played a staff-wielding fighter wizard. And Vanessa played a conjuration specialist. And the idea was that we were going to see if we can make characters based on the pre-playtest rules that could compare to the playtest ones. Like, are these two new classes justifying their existence? Do they fill their niche better than a hodgepodge version of those characters? And coincidentally, I made my staff Magus from first edition, Jamin, and Andrew made this staff fighter. Like, the fact that we were both using staffs as our main weapons, it was totally a coincidence, and our characters were so similar mechanically. And really, the only thing that separated them was the Magus abilities, which really did stand out and show how cool some of the combos you could do with the Magus stuff is. But it also highlighted some more issues with the action economy of the Magus. I'll get into that in a second. The complete opposite of that was how V's conjuration specialist compared to Alex's summoner, since Alex made a synthesis summoner.
Okay.
And did not summon a single animal that I can remember. Or maybe he did, but basically his entire time he spent inside the suit as our tank.
Oh.
And was also our healer. So yeah, at the end of it, it was like, well, me and Andrew have a lot of notes to compare, whereas Alex and V, they were totally different characters. You would not know that they both started at the same starting point.
And oh gosh, I don't know if a summoning focused conjuration specialist is the best analog there. It's definitely best analog for a version of the summoner, but I would really want to compare that to the other pet classes of the game. Something like a beast focused ranger or druid would be probably a better comparison.
That is the conclusion we came to, that Alex was saying it really felt more like a druid, and that like he went the wild shape direction of the druid instead of the animal companions version of the druid.
Honestly, that's kind of where I hope they go with synthesis. I think that they should make synthesis one of the main paths, like the shape-shifting druid, instead of just being an option that you tack on. And that way, it has the room and the permission to just sort of grow into that concept, as opposed to something that is not very satisfying to either one of the people involved.
Yeah, that's fair. In fact, when we were reviewing the playtest, I wasn't sure the synthesis did anything. Like, it didn't seem worthwhile taking. But
no, it's just a nerf. You take it and you make your character weaker for a feat.
Alex convinced me otherwise, because he was doing some things that were only made possible by the combination of using the synthesis. This is this summoner feat. So I did have a lot of fun with my version of the character. I made a mistake, but it wasn't related to the Magus. Actually, I made a couple of mistakes, but one of them wasn't related to the Magus. I wanted to recreate my staff summoner, and my staff Magus. Staff Magus was an archetype from Ultimate Magic, which is also the book that introduced the Magus. And so this is an option that's been there since the beginning. And the idea is that you are using a quarterstaff one-handed, so you can still cast your spells in the other hand. And eventually you can get a magic staff, and you can cast spells from the staff onto it. It's not even that great of an archetype, but I like the visual of it. So that's why I originally took it. And I was surprised that a lot of the options for the staff Magus could not be recreated with the playtest version of the Magus. But one thing that could have been that I wasn't using right was that I could have been using that magic staff I had as a weapon. I was walking around with two staves, one of which was my weapon staff, and the other one was my casting staff. And I made a point that I was dropping it, and I was playing a tiefling, because my original character Jamin was a tiefling, and I had the prehensile tail racial or ancestry feat, because that is also an option that I took first edition, and that was the workaround for this thing that I did not need to work around. I was dropping the staff, and then the tail would pick it up so that I could then hand it to my regular hands after combat. Anyway, a whole thing happens where I drop it where I shouldn't have, and I lose the staff, a very valuable magic item for a while, because we were playing 6th level characters. I could barely afford the staff. But what I liked about the Magus was that having that staff did boost up my limited spell casting. It gave me the ability to do that casting that I was missing out on. It gave me a couple of utility spells. It was a Staff of Abjuration, so it gave me Shield, it gave me Featherfall, which turned out to come in handy. And the reason I took it was to recreate a 1st edition character. But going forward, if I make more Magus characters, I will definitely look at magic weapons to supplement my limited spellcasting abilities.
I think both apply. Both words actually apply in that for how bad things off are there. Honestly, that's becoming one of the big complaints after the episode. I've since gone and looked at what the community feedback was, and one of the complaints with the Magus is that having a magic staff has become a sort of item tax to make the class actually functional.
And this is a class that needs a fancy weapon and fancy armor. So having an item tax really hurts the Magus more than any other class.
Are very pricey. So very pricey. And honestly, the only reason I never complain about the price of staves are because the characters that want them don't usually have a lot else to do with their money. Like if you're a PF2 wizard, you really don't need money very much at all. And so the staves being expensive is one of the few things you actually want to use your money on. And like a bunch of very cheap wands, but wands are cheap.
Now, if you'll remember, the Magus, his subclasses are the Synthesis. There was the Shooting Star for the ranged Magus, Slide Casting for the single-handed weapon, and Sustaining Steel for a two-handed weapon. I went with Sustaining Steel, one, because I had a quarterstaff and no way of using it one-handed, and because I wanted to do the most familiar version of this build, I wanted to have a quarterstaff fighter. So I went with Sustaining Steel, even though Slide Casting is the one that gave you Bladed Dash and let you move around, which my main concern going into it was that I'm never going to have a chance to move because I've got to cast a spell and attack, and that's all my actions. And in the first combat, there was difficult terrain, and I was like, oh no, I didn't even consider modifying how my mobility. My mobility is only average. Actually, I even took the feat to bump it up. And I was so limited when suddenly I could not move at full speed to move one round, set up my what was it called? The striking spell the second round. So yeah, if they don't do something that gives me an action to move all Maguses, I really think that this class is going to freak out whenever it comes to difficult terrain, because it can't afford to have spells that let it work around the difficult terrain and let it work around things that are limiting its action economy. Because I was also grappled in the second combat, which affected my ability to either cast spells or have my full round of actions.
And gosh, with the ridiculously tiny amount of spells you get per day, you can't even afford to have utility spells in those slots.
So I did have utility spells in those slots because I was mostly using... Oh, no, sorry. No. What I had was differently offensive powers in those slots. I had Deafen. I don't remember offhand, and I don't have my character in front of me, but my cantrips were all about adding additional damage to my attacks. My higher level ones were adding debuffs to my attacks so that if I had to deal with a certain situation, I could whack the guy, still deliver it through an attack, but it's not just to deal as much damage as possible, but to have the most effective attack as possible.
Well, I mean, with that class, its one gimmick is really being able to land those powerful spells in with those melee attacks. That's kind of the reason it exists. And you only have 4 chances of doing that per day that isn't a cantrip level version of it. And you didn't sign up for that class to basically spam cantrips. You signed up for that class to do those really big, impressive mega swings a few times per day. And with only 4 spells per day that you get to spend that on, and the fact that PF2 average, when you do the math against equal level or even one level higher, you're looking at maybe a 30% chance of success. You're really only ever going to pull that off once per day. You can't afford to use those slots for anything else.
So I'm going to disagree with you that spamming cantrips is not one of the reasons you go into it. I think the main visual of the Magus is just swinging a sword that's on fire or crackling with some kind of energy. And cantrips pull that off. It lets you do it forever, and you get the additional fire damage. So you get to be a slightly more damaging warrior sometimes, and every now and then you could also do a bigger spell. The first edition Magus was more about doing little bit, going Nova and just blowing everything up in the last encounter. I think this gives you more intermediary, smaller, but still fairly big explosions rather than just the one big explosion at the end of the scenario.
I know, but I can do the small little... The intermediary part is not the part that the Magus lets me do. There's other character builds already in this game that let me do that anytime I want.
Well, despite some of my issues with the action economy, I did have a lot of fun playing it, and it was fun having an objective that it's like, I don't just want to squat and do striking spell every single round.
Right.
I thought that's what I wanted, but what I actually want to do is work towards it. And then when I finally do earn that ability to just sit there and use striking spell round after round, it feels more satisfying. And the couple of utilitarian rounds that got me there are also fun because I'm just driving forward.
What about Wand of True Strike? Did you have one of those in your back pocket?
I did not, but Andrew had a True Strike based fighter wizard, and he did not get to use that trick as often as he thought he would.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, True Strike's not my bag.
It's just if I'm going to land one of those big Magus hits, like especially if I'm going to throw my top level spell at it, spending a one round to make sure that it not only hits but is likely to crit would be definitely worth the effort.
Oh, actually, speaking of crits, that was the other thing. I roll so many dice as a Magus because the cantrip was giving me additional damage dice, and the Magus potency gave me an additional damage die, and so on a crit I was rolling 5 dice.
Oh my goodness.
And I also have to roll 3 times, I have to roll really well one time to confirm the hit, and then I have to do the striking spell attack. That also has to hit. And so yeah, it's 2 attacks, one of which has to be a crit, and then I get a whole bunch of dice. And I was not prepared for that with the dice that I had laid out in front of me. So there was a lot of math, a lot of which I left in the edit of the episode, just so to give people the feeling like, if you're playing this class, get used to rolling a lot of dice and doing a lot of small addition.
That's definitely one of the big changes I hope they make, is to unify those 2 to hit rolls into 1 at least, just so that the amount of dice is manageable, and that if they are going to have such a limited resource, that it's a little bit more consistent.
Oh, and as I mentioned, I also forgot to use Beast Spell Strike, which would have given me an additional D6 of energy damage every time I used an energy spell with Spell Strike. And every single time I used Spell Strike, it was with an energy spell. So should have been rolling even more dice.
Now, that's something that a difficulty you run into before with Xavier and other characters. Do you think that this is going to be a very difficult character for people to run?
Like remembering all the little things that...
there's a lot of moving parts here.
There are, but they mostly synergize. A lot of them are just based around making sure your spell strike is as cool as possible, but costing you the least in the moment. It costs you character creation resources, but like Beast Spell Strike is a free action. And that's huge. Yeah, actually, you get a lot of free actions. So I would actually say I found this less confusing than most second edition characters of that level that I've experienced with.
Okay.
Getting higher level, maybe that'll become an issue. But at 6th level, it was still manageable. I really just forgot one thing, and this was a character I'd made from scratch at 6th level for this one game. So the fact that I forgot one thing is not that bad.
What would you think a good high-level Magus multi-class would be useful for? Like, if you're playing a high-level Magus, what would you throw in as a second class to multi-class with?
Definitely a caster that gives you access to a different spell list, since Spell Strike works with all spell lists you have access to. So Off the top of my head, I'm thinking druid.
Mm.
Because it is still a prepared caster, although maybe even a sorcerer with like the
yeah, that's what I was thinking. A sorcerer nature, with the primal list.
Yeah, primal. There we go. The primal tradition.
Oh, or
shape-shifting
druids.
Yes.
Adding even more melee oomph to your character, giving you more melee options, and giving you access to that list.
Especially because by default, all of your Magus stuff works with your wielded weapon or your unarmed attack. And it spells it out very specifically every single time. So if you could get some shape-shifting in there, then you are using your unarmed attack. You could still bespell your unarmed attack. So if you're, I don't know, a T-Rex, you can do all of this with just a magic flaming bite attack.
A kung fu owlbear with lightning kicks.
Could you turn into an owlbear?
Yeah, you can turn into an owlbear.
All right.
Yeah.
All right then, kung fu owlbear with lightning kicks. Why are you kicking if you're an owlbear?
Because okay, part of this is because one of my players in my Age of Ashes game is playing a kung fu bear monk druid shapeshifter combo, and it's really fun to watch. And also, Primal's a great list for this because Primal has access to almost so many elemental spells. In second edition, like if you're used to first edition druid list, second edition druid list is so much better. You get fireball, you get flame strike, you get all the lightning, you get all the snow. I mean, if you wanted to be an elemental blaster, a storm focused druid build would not be a bad choice.
Yeah, I mean the extra blasty spells was the reason I was thinking nature list. It was just a matter of primal list. I don't know why I call it the nature list. It was just a matter of figuring out what class gives access to that would best suit the Magus. You think that the
so you could do witch, oracle, sorcerer, druid. Those are probably the easiest to access. Which would be interesting.
Which would be interesting. Which would be interesting.
And you could take a lot of abilities to buff up your familiar and have a flank buddy.
Yeah, I guess the witch dedication gives you familiar, right?
Yeah, well, witches, familiars are required to even make a witch work. It's your pact bond.
I know, but dedications don't always recreate everything one-to-one. I'm just going to open up the APG and see what the witch dedication gives me. Archetypes. Nope.
Oh gosh. And like, oh man, this would be one of the few times that if I did the witch focus, this would be one of the few times that I tried to squeeze in 2 archetypes into a character, because I would want to have Familiar Master on top of that.
Oh yeah. So witch dedication, you cast spells like a witch, choose a patron, you gain a familiar with 2 common cantrips of your choice from your chosen patron's tradition. So yeah, you definitely get a familiar.
Oh, you need it. Witch doesn't work without one.
I don't know about that. Like mechanically it doesn't, but thematically I can see witches without familiars.
True, but they're so much more fun when they have the talking sarcastic animal.
Next bit of news. This is something that you've got a little bit more familiarity with than I do. Roll for Combat released their top 101 monsters and opened public voting for RPG Superstar.
Oh, yes. Yes, the RPG Superstar, man, there was so many monsters to judge for that. I was one of the judges that narrowed this down to the top 100 monsters, and so many monsters to judge to get here. Yeah, but if you want, all these were community submitted as part of the new RPG Superstar contest as being run by Roll for Combat. Now is the chance to go down there and vote for your favorite monsters. And to see who will win the ultimate RPG Superstar prize.
And I know that you and V and Alex and Luis, were you all on the judging team?
Yep.
As it was going on, every now and then you would be like, oh, we've got so many more monsters to cover. And, you know, I empathized. But then when it came out and it's like, all right, now I've got to fit reading 101 monsters into my schedule and judging them. It's like, that's a lot of monsters. And you had way more monsters than that to worry about.
Oh, yeah. It was fun. There's definitely some interesting themes, but I don't want to, until the voting is over, I don't want to influence the voting at all. But I noticed that there, like when we did our contest, there's definitely a lot of common themes. So there was definitely a lot of monsters submitted along the same lines that just surprised us. Like why was, just to go to the other one, evidently everybody wanted to combine Kaiden with Grandmother Spider in like almost every other pantheon that got submitted to our contest as an example of something random. And there's definitely some trends in the RPG Superstar monsters that just I didn't expect to see.
I got to double check, when does voting end? Oh, that's not on the link I have, so I'm gonna have to go to the main RPG Superstar page. There's the handy timeline. All right, top 10 voting ends October 5th, which means as of this recording, there's a couple of weeks to fit in 101 monster reads and votes. I'm going to try and do it. That is the time that we're supposed to be preparing for the Pathfinder Society hardcover book review. I think I got time to squeeze it in. Now that the playtest is done and PF 2.KD is, we've crested the hill on it. I think I've got a little more time to read some monsters.
Well, this is one of the few times I'm glad that I can't participate any further because it's done for me. Good luck, everyone.
Last bit of news, and this is exciting. Hero Forge 2.0, the public release is coming September 29th. So 2.0 is when Hero Forge added color to its pre-printed miniatures. Alex has been a big fan of it and has been keeping us all informed and making me jealous of not having back to the Kickstarter, because he's even shown the difference between an early printed 3D color miniature and a couple of months later how they've advanced technology enough that it already looks cleaner, smoother, and
less hazy.
Colors pop more. Less hazy. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, I probably will never order a color one, and only because I have a 3D printer and I like to paint minis. But if either one of those things were not true, this is a fantastic way to get your player character. I can't justify this for anything else but a player character, something you're going to be spending a lot of time on. Or maybe if you're doing wargaming, like one of your heroes or something important. This is not something you want to buy a bunch of because it costs $40 each. But they're so good.
I recently signed up for the Boss Fight Studios action figure customizing class, and that's where I made my dragon fighter here.
I never got to see it finished. Let me see.
You never got to see him finished? Sorry, here it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love it.
And a lot of what I enjoyed out of this was that they gave you the finished picture of what it's supposed to look like. And then as you're doing the steps, anytime you're lost, you can just reference back to it. And I realized I should just always have a finished 2D version of what I want my 3D guy to look for, like, because I get so lost in the colors. And I knew Hero Forge 2.0 was coming. So it's like in the future, whenever I want to paint a miniature, step one is going to go to Hero Forge, make a color version of that miniature, or even painting an action figure, just make a likeness of it as a miniature, figure out all the colors, and then use that as the template that I'm going to be painting off of. And that's one of the functions of the tool. Like, it will cost me nothing and I will get better miniatures out of it.
I have paid for tools to do that. There are, this is a concept that's existed in the miniature painting world for a while, is various different phone apps, especially, that will mock up different paint schemes that you can try out on like sets, like especially a lot of like Warhammer Space Marines and stuff. It's just like, color my Space Marine in this app, so you can figure out what color you want your army to be. And I have given money for those apps just to be able to do that because of how convenient it is to have that set up. This is one of the best tools for the job when Hero Forge is ready.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know why I didn't sign up for... I don't know why I didn't back the Kickstarter. It is a tool I plan on using. It is a Kickstarter I've brought up multiple times because I'm excited about it existing. I guess I'm just reaping the benefit of everyone else putting the money into this one.
I
feel bad about that.
Too much money on getting to go to PAX was the reason I didn't.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, that's it for the news segment, Perram. We're going to be right back to wrap things up right after this.
Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shout-outs.
And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Before we go, we'd like to shout out to some things that are of interest to us, and we think would be of interest to you, as you know, people who enjoy things we enjoy.
This should have been news.
The first one should have been
so important. It should have been news.
All right. Well, you know what? After we talk about this, we are going to take advantage of the fact that we had to record this segment a couple of days later, because there is some breaking news from Hasbro as well that I don't know if you've seen yet.
I don't know. I haven't.
Okay. Well, first talk about HeroQuest. It is not HeroQuest related. It is Hasbro related, but I think you're going to find it pretty cool.
Okay. So HeroQuest is coming back. A new revived super awesome version of the game is coming out. It looks to be the original game rules. The stats look the same. All the parts look like they're definitely one-to-one mapped. A billion new minis coming in here that look way better than the sculpts that came with the original box sets. Look like. I am super pumped for this. It's awesome. We've played HeroQuest on stream before. There's a video out there of me teaching Ryan how to play HeroQuest. That's really fun and definitely worth a watch. I love this game. I want to play a lot of HeroQuest, and I when this news came out, we did a live reaction video that you can watch online. You can catch us doing that. And so if you want to see our original opinions at the time of the reveal, it's there. I threw down for the big package immediately. As soon as that recording was over, I was like, here, give me it all. Thank you. I need this in my life.
Now, something I only noticed at the end of the recording is that while this is available to Canada, it is not available to Quebec.
Oh, no.
That happens a lot. Quebec has very specific rules.
Am I smuggling a HeroQuest box across the border?
Yeah, good luck getting across the border. That would be a real smuggle.
Oh, goodness, you're right.
But actually, one of the other things is that the original shipping cost to Canada was $100.
Oh, my gosh!
Of the lower tier. They've revised it. It's now $30. So I have a feeling it was an error on their part, and not that they got a bad quote and didn't realize how bad the quote was. So yeah, if anyone Canadian looked at the HeroQuest, went to back it, saw the price, and walked away, walk back, because the shipping cost is much more reasonable now.
Now I was like, seriously, like if I'm going to duct tape this to the bottom of a froghemoth and
yeah, so it is. I don't think it was fully funded by when we recorded our video, but it is now. It was $1 million target. They're at $1.5 million, which I think already makes it more successful than most of the other Hasbro Pulse crowdfunding efforts.
I'm surprised it hasn't gone over 2 million already.
It's only been a couple of days.
I know. I'm used to these sorts of things just exploding immediately.
Well, that might be a reflection of the stretch goals. I know you got a couple of extra things, but like some of the stretch goals were not super exciting.
Yeah.
So you get the Warlock. Okay, that's pretty cool. And cool. 6 extra dice. Then the next goal is 2 skeletons.
Yeah.
2 extra skeletons, 2 extra goblins, 2 of the most common types of miniatures. So unless you are super in love with those sculpts, that's not a whole lot better. The one at 2 million is the quest book by Stephen Baker, who is one of the designers. He's got his bio a little further down. That actually feels like a goal worth working towards. But
yeah,
extra skeletons and goblins, I almost wonder if they should have just not included those.
Yeah.
Because there is very little exciting about them. Actually, I don't even know about the extra combat dice, how exciting that is.
Like the dice for HeroQuest were proprietary, so that's a little bit better. I can't just grab my Reaper Bones box of 1,000 minis I'll never paint and I could reach in there right now randomly and pull out 2 extra skeletons and goblins without looking at what I was grabbing. But you know what I can't bring out?
What can't you bring out? Hey, look at him!
Yes. So you all can relax. Ryan is getting his froghemoth. This turned out really great. I had to make one for myself as soon as I saw how good yours looked.
Very cool. All right, well, don't ship that to me just yet. We're going to talk about that after the okay, well, I was going to say we'll save it till after the show, but I might as well. I don't like teasing when there's no reason to. Boss Fight is having a 20% off sale on Saturday, and I want to get you a blank male and a blank female, so that if we ever want to do custom boss fight scale accessories and stuff for action figures or alternate body parts, you've got the figures, and then you've got your 3D printer.
Yeah, I've got that spear that you sent with the other project.
Yeah, to give you an idea of the hand size. But now I'll get you the actual figures, and then we'll see if we can come up with some other fun things to make shipping that Froghemoth a little more cost effective.
I made a Ninja Turtle periscope for Crystal.
Oh yeah, you showed me the 3D model of that. It was super cool. I recognized it right away. And you did that just from I
just did that
reference picture. Yeah. That was very cool.
No, I that was 100% Perram creation.
Nice.
I'm getting much better at this.
Yes, you are. All right, Perram. The next big Hasbro news is also action figure related. They have announced a new line of Dungeons & Dragons 6-inch action figures. And I would like you to click on the two images I linked to in the Discord.
Oh boy!
Sorry, not in the Discord. We're not on Discord right now.
No.
In our Google Doc. So when you click on that, what do you see?
I'm pulling this up. On the screen, it's Drizzt and Guinevere.
Yep.
They look so awesome. Where do I throw money? I need to throw money at this right now.
I don't have a lot of details. It was just announced that Hasbro PulseCon is going on this weekend, if you didn't know. And today was their big Dungeons & Dragons announcement. And that is an impressive action figure.
Oh, man. 1,000 Orcs is one of my favorite books ever in the fantasy genre from R.A. Salvatore. Oh, man. Drizzt is one, obviously. I think Drizzt is at his best in that novel.
Well, just some things to point out about this action figure. It's got swappable heads, and each head has swappable hair. So you've got the cool dynamic flowing in the wind hair versus the just hanging loose, letting gravity do its thing hair. And so you've also got the battle expression and the more neutral expression. So you can swap those any configuration. And I showed this to Matt Belanger, my former co-host on Private Sanctuary, and he is a huge Drizzt fan. And he's the one that pointed out it's two different swords. They actually went out of their way to make sure the swords each have their own design and personality.
It's Twinkle and Icing Death.
And they've got these ice energy sheaths so that you can make it look like it's glowing with energy. Got alternate hands. He's got Guinevere.
Tiny
also got Guinevere as the figurine of wondrous power. That was a super.
Gosh. I have this up on screen right now. A D20, a themed D20 comes with it.
That is a gorgeous D20 on top of it.
Oh my gosh!
Yes, Hasbro has done a couple of dips into Dungeons & Dragons action figures in the last year. The first one was that Dungeons & Dragons My Little Pony crossover, and they also included dice that match the action figure in that.
I should get that.
Seems to be the space they're going to be going at. And what a great little nod to be like, if anyone buys this because they think it's a cool figure and they get this weird die, welcome to a gigantic world of something a whole new hobby for you.
I'm gonna have to do the way to. This is one figure I'm gonna have to do the cliche collector thing of buying two.
Buying two and keep one in the box? I think, yeah. I was gonna say you could display Hasbro's been pretty good about having packages that you can open without destroying the package so that you can have them out to play with and on display.
Yeah, I'm buying $200 Japanese anime figures and I don't keep them in the box. But this one, the box presentation is just so good.
Yeah. And what's weird, so this was announced and it's been out for about 3 hours now, and I have not seen a whole lot of people talking about this, which shocks me because I had the same reaction as you on that. This is gorgeous.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I haven't thought about Drizzt or the Forgotten Realms since starting playing Pathfinder, and I'm already nostalgic for it. Ah, man. Honestly, what happened with the Forgotten Realms is one of the biggest motivators to why I play Pathfinder.
Yep. They rebooting the settings when they rebooted the rules means that they lost people that were fans because of the rules and fans because of the setting.
I would still be a D&D player if they had not rebooted the settings when they did that. I would have just trundled through, which is one of the reasons I'm glad Pathfinder did not reboot its setting when it moved over the second edition. It updated the setting a little bit, but that's real minor.
Popular coin, that's about the biggest change between first edition and second edition.
Yeah, but we can just call that like a depression due to zombie. because man, the world got wrecked real hard when
the whole economy crashed exactly 10%.
Yeah, 90%.
Oh no, exact 90%. Yeah, sorry, I went the wrong way.
Well, a zombie apocalypse has an effect on things. Oh man.
All right. Well, since we were talking about action figures, I do want to do one more action figure related shout out, and that is to a YouTube video. This is a channel that Kathy hooked me up with. It's called Doll-Lightful, and she customizes dolls. She customizes mainly Monster High dolls and dolls in that nature. So it's like the super articulated fashion dolls.
Yeah, this does look really cool.
But the 2-minute mark, when she says, I want to shrink the head down 2 sizes, so I plop it in a jar of acetote for 2 hours. Acetote, sorry. That's when I was like, oh, there was more chemistry in this than I thought. And then later she 3D prints some new feet for it. And it's like, oh, this is chemistry and engineering and artwork. Like,
oh my
I've seen a couple of Doll-Lightful videos before, because Kathy will send me the ones that she thinks I will especially appreciate. But this one is on a whole other level. And I am jealous of this artist's skills, talents in multiple areas. Like, there's some people that I'll look at and be like, man, maybe if I tried really hard one day I could be as good as them. Not her. I have no chance of ever catching up with the talent of Doll-Lightful.
Oh my gosh. This is the level of kit bashing that I love.
Yeah.
I found a new favorite channel. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Ryan. I'm subscribing to this right now, turning on the bell icon. Please, let me see everything about this.
All right, next one on the list is a Kickstarter that you brought my attention to.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about Titancraft, the customizable Monster Minis Kickstarter?
There's 13 days to go on this one. I love Titancraft. Now, you might have heard me talk about how awesome a piece of software called Desktop Hero is, which is it's like a version of Hero Forge that is much more customizable, but also a lot more rough around the edges. You pay for that. Like, this is like, have you ever used like the open source version of a piece of software like LibreOffice or GIMP? Yeah. Desktop Hero is the GIMP compared to Hero Forge's Photoshop, which can do so much more and can do some amazing things, but you got to learn to use it and to live with its very specific quirks. But the Sencamp crew is doing something even much more ambitious called Titancraft. And I've pulled up the Kickstarter page here because it is all about customizing monsters. And they have a bunch of like monster chassis, which would be like different heritage options or ancestry options in Hero Forge. And those chassis are like eyeball beast, but they're super customizable. Like, instead of an eyeball beast, it's a giant skull. Instead of tentacles, you've got wings, and just we're gonna graft on random swords, and it has basically a bunch of anchor points and preset scale options and tools to repose and stuff. And this is basically doing what I already do with Blender and with my digital kit bashing and stuff. It's a way of doing that sort of stuff a lot more user friendly. They've got a bunch of monsters already funded through the Kickstarters: dragons, giants, demons, eyeball beasts, various 4-legged monster type things. If you want your cool wolf demon things, this is the way to go. Aboleth. I don't know why Aboleth needed to have its own thing, but, and of course the gelatinous cube, which is mostly customized in what you can throw into the gelatinous cube.
Yep, that's cool.
And they keep adding new monsters as this has gone on. It's already like doubled in the number of monsters that are available. They will do the Hero Forge thing of printing it out for you, but the cool thing about this in Desktop Hero is that if you pay for the digital versions, the all-in STL bundles or equivalent, you can buy the chassis, in which case, if you have a 3D printer or you want to use a 3D printing service, there's lots of places that will print stuff for you if you send them the files at fairly reasonable rates. You can basically make as many versions of the monsters as you want without having to buy them individually. You just pay an upfront cost. I think the all-in is like $60 US for the software, and it lets you just make infinite amounts of monsters and download them over and over again. Whereas with Hero Forge, I still love Hero Forge, but I have to pay them like $7 or $8 every time I download a mini from them, even if it's just a slight variation of a mini I made before.
I have not played with the alpha until now. I've just been kind of fooling around with it. And this is a very familiar UI for anyone that knows Hero Forge. And I really like the idea of the adding the parts.
Yeah.
Where you can just start adding things, moving them around, changing the size. I really like the way they've designated the areas that you can put them on there.
There's a lot of enhancements here too to the software, to the original Desktop Hero software, where they that they needed to do for monsters, so you can like drastically rescale and shape things and plump things up or make them skinny or throw another arm on there, because of course you need more arms on your giant beholder beasties. And they're going to be backporting those as free updates to Desktop Hero too. So if you like what they're doing with the monsters, maybe check out Desktop Hero. It's free to use. They even have like a whole free set of basically they divide it up by assets, and there's like these sets of armor and weapon are completely free. If you use these, you can just download the files or have them printed. No big deal. And then like you can buy like equipment packs. So like, here's a whole bunch of stuff for sorcerers. Here's a whole bunch of modern stuff. Here's a sci-fi pack. Here's not Star Wars pack. And so they're doing that with the monsters too, but you buy the monster chassis. So you buy a dragon, and then you can customize all the dragons you want. And if you want a beholder, you got to buy the eyeball beast pack and so on. And I do like that they're backporting the features for free and across both versions. So even if you're not interested in monsters, this means great things if you're interested in characters and vice versa.
And now on to our regular shoutouts. So podcast shout-out, there's a couple of them that I want to bring attention to. One of them you've probably already heard of. It's Office Ladies. It's by Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey. Jenna Fisher played Pam on The Office. Angela Kinsey played Angela on The Office. And they are doing a watch-through of The Office and just talking about a lot of behind-the-scenes trivia and whatnot. And I'm not even a huge The Office fan. I know a lot of people are, and I have seen the series beginning to end once, and that was enough for me. But I am a fan of trivia, and they both go really far out of their way talking about little nuances, things that are foreshadowed. So like in story trivia, behind the scenes trivia, and just a lot of the experience of being on the set, especially because Pam was one of the main characters and Angela was one of the background characters. And so they've got two very different perspectives on it. So I'm giving that a quick shout out because they have millions of subscribers and they don't need my shout out. But if you are a fan of The Office, you will probably enjoy that. Next one is Ologies. This is by Ali Ward. And every episode she discusses a field. And so the first episode is about volcanology, and it's about people who study volcanoes. And every single episode she'll interview a couple of the people that are related to the ology in question. She'll define it. She'll talk a little bit about what it was like to discover that this is a field of study. And they're about an hour long. They're really informative. They're fun, and they're smart.
I want to shout out to the Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy. And the reason I want to shout out to it, and I also want to shout out to a podcast called Paint Bravely, is that the learning to paint and the painting community for miniatures can sometimes be a little toxic. Lots of people have bemoaned what happens if you post a picture of a mini and you're not like the world's best painter, or even if you are the world's best painter, somebody will still come in and criticize your stuff because that's just part of the community. Really mean community. And also there's like in the mini painting community, there's all this like because of its very close approximation to Warhammer, there's all this like really heavy metal, grimdark, kind of that sort of thematics attached to a lot of the adjacent material, and it is really refreshing when somebody like Goober Town shows up, or Midwinter, and it's just, we're real chill and positive, and we're going to learn how to paint this really cool thing and relax, and this is all about fun. Duncan is also sometimes called Lord Duncan. Was Games Workshop's official painting teacher for a very long time.
Oh, I remember Duncan from the White Dwarf magazines.
Yes, the person who coined or at least popularized for mini painting too thin coats as like a mantra that you must pray to while you are getting your brushes ready. But he has split off from GW now, and he's doing his own painting classes and tutorial video series and stuff. And there's like a pay-in option, but there's also just a free YouTube channel you can watch. And it is some of the best produced, best explained painting tutorials I've ever seen. I rank this right up there with Midwinter and Goober Town, but with a level of polish and professionalism that I would dare anybody to match.
Wow.
And it's free, so just go check it out.
Anything else to shout out to Perram, or am I going to point people to the cool things that happened on the site in the last couple of weeks?
Go to cool things.
All right. So on nodirection.com, we release a new podcast and a new blog post just about every weekday of the week. Mm-hmm. And this past Monday, we saw the return of Stellar. Stellar, you may have heard jokes every now and then that are probably slightly in joke. So just to explain it, Stellar is sometimes referred to as our cursed show. We have more trouble scheduling it than most. And it's usually only the day of recording that we get the issue where we find out a cast member's basement flooded, or just some flash in the pan thing that should not happen and happens, and always happens on recording day for Stellar. Mm-hmm. But we managed to get a new episode out, and it just reminded me of everything I love about Stellar. The repartee between the characters, you all improvise really well. You build off of what each other is saying. You know your characters so well. You stay in character. You keep the jokes in character. You don't like break into meta commentary. And so even when nothing is happening, technically, it was just like, did anyone buy anything between the last two episodes? It becomes a 10-15 minute scene, and it is just a delight.
Mm-hmm. I love playing in Stellar so much. It really helps show off what I think is great about Starfinder, and it's just this pure freedom of character expression and storytelling, and just pure fun, and some of the best crew I could possibly play with on that show. I look forward, which is why I hate that it's cursed, because Stellar is one of the recordings I look forward to most doing every week.
And the article I'm going to shout out to is investing in Pathfinder 2e subsystems. So investing in is the article. It's the series written by Rob Pontius. Rob Pontius, before No Direction, was a member, and actually still is. Yeah. Rob is known as a member of the Order of the Amber Die, and what he brought to No Direction as a network was a broadening of what we are covering. So every 2 weeks, he will look at a game system that we might not know about and just talk about why he is super excited about it. And to just change the pattern, this last installment he talked about Pathfinder, but specifically he was talking about the Game Mastery Guide, which we were talking about earlier, how versatile a tool the Game Mastery Guide is in second edition. He was talking about a series of subsystems he was considering using, and he talks about the subsystem, and then he talks about specifically its role in his campaign, and then how it relates to the other subsystems he's going to be using. Mm-hmm. So he's talking about reputation, leadership, and influence, and he is talking about how he is making a very socially dynamic campaign, and these three subsystems will really impact how characters can interact with each other and the mechanical ramifications of those interactions.
It really is an article that exemplifies a lot of why I wanted Rob as part of the No Direction Network from pretty much the day I met him at Gen Con. Is he has this level of enthusiasm and positive momentum that is just exemplifies everything I think everybody should aspire to in their geekdom, and just see it applied so thoroughly to the one of the game systems dearest to my heart was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. So if for whatever reason you haven't read Rob's articles before, maybe because you are only playing Paizo RPGs, so you just don't have the time for other RPGs. So maybe you thought, these articles aren't for me. Read this one just to get a feel for Rob's mastery of positive language. It's been said that it is much easier to critique something than it is to compliment it. And Rob has the rare gift of being able to compliment things so well. Perram?
Yes.
That wraps things up for us. Normally, I would say we'll meet our patrons on the Private Sanctum. We already recorded that Private Sanctum, but supposing this was still a Wednesday night live recording, how could people find out more about us and join us for the Patrons Private Sanctum?
Our Patron Private Sanctum is a special hangout that happens after every episode of No Direction, where we do a fan-focused chat. We talk about what the fans want us to talk about. If you're one of the patrons, you're allowed to get in there and participate, to direct us and to listen to it, as well as to listen to the recordings after the fact. You can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/no-direction, and then hop on our Discord channel. As long as you have synced your Discord account with your Patreon account, you will automatically be granted access, be able to hang out into our Patreon chat, be able to participate in our upcoming shop housing of our 2-point KD optional rule sets, as well as, just sort of participate in these episodes. They are one of my favorite things to do lately, is just to have these really candid conversations that is just talking about whatever they want us to chat about. And I think that any No Direction fan would appreciate some of those episodes. So if you can be a patron at any level, we do open that up to any level of patron, right?
Joining us live is the $5. Joining us live is any level, but the $5 plus gets the recording after that.
Okay, yeah. So we would very much appreciate you participating in that. We appreciate everything our patrons are able to do. It's only through your assistance that we've been able to grow and expand and continue to enjoy this roller coaster ride that is this network. And I think the reason I like it most is that it's one of the things we do that is very much fan driven for fans. So patreon.com/no direction, or the Patreon link at the side of the no direction podcast.com page will get you there. We would appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing all of you all there.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.